scent, John thought. Even if they could not see Ghost, they would panic. John charged, the fighters from the north and the riverlands following, armed with lances, torches, mace and swords. It was not a battle, but a rout. Westermen were rushing around in the chaos, attempting to calm the maddened horses when John's forces struck. Tents burned and heads rolled as 2,000 horsemen raced through, cutting down any resistance. Boys fled in all directions, some jumping into the river, others dropping any armor or weapons as they dashed west and south, fleeing for their lives. In a blink of an eye, the battle was over. Hundreds, perhaps even thousands were dead or dying. Others cowered, unable to escape and begging for mercy. There were so many young boys, John thought. Stafford Lannister must have raised his recruits from the pot shops, wharves and slums of Lannisport. John rode the Garon to the large crimson tent at the center of the camp. Ghost met him, the wolf's fangs dripping blood. The Mormont girls were already there, dragging an old man with thinning yellow hair and a big square chin. There were several other captives in the tent, a lord who had only donned half his black steel armor with 3 golden lion heads before being knocked him senseless, and another man wearing the unicorn of House Brax captured by Jory. Snow, this is Stafford Lannister. He was trying to flee but Ghost killed his horse. Daisy said. Daisy, call for Lady Mormont and the other lords. We need to meet urgently. John said. I need to know our list of captives. Who else is in this camp, Lannister? You will have to kill me first. Stafford shouted. John rolled his eyes. I will find out soon enough. Lady Mormont, the Smallgen, Eddard Karstark and Wendell Marndaly gathered in the tent, and many of the northern lords looked troubled. How many captives do we have? John asked. Thousands, my lord. But they are not. The Smallgen's words were interrupted as several rivermen entered, the Goodbrooks and the Ridgers. Where are the others? Where are the Freys and the Charltons? John asked. They are busy looting, sir. Black Walder and his brothers are searching the tents for gold and silver. Limond Goodbrook said. We have no time for this. Tell them I want them to come immediately to this meeting. If they don't, I will hang them for disobeying my orders. John said coldly. After the knight rushed to relay the message, the Smallgen continued. Maester, we captured thousands but even more fled on foot. Should we pursue them? John shook his head. We do not know the terrain, and many have no doubt run west on the river road. Soon they will raise the alarm in the village of Oxcross. We have no time to waste. John noticed the Mormont girls whispering. Why do you look so troubled, Lady Mage? It would be easier if we showed you. Lady Mormont beckoned her men. They dragged in a half-dozen prisoners. The first was a blond boy of 10 and 2. The next was perhaps a name day older. The next boy was even younger. The other 3 prisoners were alike, none were older than 10 and 4. Why are they so young? John asked. Maester, they are all like that. The entire camp is full of beardless boys. I do not wish to kill children. Eddard Karstark said. The Mormont soldiers brought in more prisoners. It was the same pattern, boys who should have been handling horses and polishing armor, not fighting with swords and spears. These men are green, master. Untrained recruits, farm boys with nowhere to go. Lyra captured some fishermen who had been pressed into the army only 3 days ago. Lady Mormont said. The Freys walked into the room. Perwyn Free helped a hobbling Stephen Free while Black Walder looked on angrily. I am sorry, Lord Snow. I took a cut in the shoulder. And then you fell off your horse. Black Walder sneered. At least he was fighting. You were trying to rape the camp followers. Perwyn snapped. Enough. John looked at Black Walder with great distaste. We have important business. Were there sellswords or freeriders? There may have been some, Maester. But those ones are probably the first to run. It was the boys who tried to protect the horses and the tents. Wendell Marndaly said. John peered more closely at one of the taller boys. He was young and lanky with the same green emerald eyes as Geryon. I know you. I saw you at Riverrun. You were a squire. The boy nodded his head and stared at the ground. Tybalt Marbrand. You swore an oath not to raise arms against the Northmen. I will pay the price. I have been captured twice now. Tybalt said bravely. The young boy hid his fear well. He may have been foolish, but he was a brave lad. What a victory! We captured boys so green, they are not smart enough to run away. Black Walder japed. These are not just young boys. Look at their hands and garb. These are not small folk. This one is a Marbrand. Which houses are you from? John asked prisoners. Leiden. Seret Prester. Farman. Vicary. Broom. Plum. The voices rang out. John paced the tent, in deep thought. What does this mean, Maester? Eddard Carstark asked. It explains why the camp is at Oxcross. John turned to Stafford Lannister. Tell me, how many times have you travelled to the Golden Tooth? And with which houses? The old knight blinked stupidly. But how did you find out? Stafford Lannister truly was a dolt. He had just confirmed John's suspicions. Lady Mormont. We have an urgent task, and it must be done immediately. These instructions have to be followed precisely. Jory and Lyra, find Lister, and the Wintertown boys. I need them here now. Dacey, Eddard, Smallgen, and Wendell, I need the best fighters in our forces. Tell all the men, prepare to ride. John said. Alysanne Leford drank her cup of tea as the rest of the ladies' room clucked over lemon cakes and fruit tarts. Ailey stood out in the breakfast room. She was not as old as the matrons of the Westerlands, but she was quite mature compared to the younger daughters. Her father left her in charge of the Golden Tooth after his departure. She was also more concerned about the war, and she smoothed her long straight black hair, a vestige of her Blackwood great-grandmother. Her aunts and cousins expected these troublesome Northmen would be beaten with ease, just like the Rivermen. News of Jaime Lannister's capture and disturbing stories of prisoners and Tyrion at Riverrun had been dismissed as a temporary setbacks. The young wolf had not faced the old lion, and Tywin Lannister, as Sir Stafford tediously noted, had never lost a war. My dear niece, you must think of the future, her Aunt Serena said. And what future is that? Alysanne said. Marriage, my dear. You are not getting any younger. My son, Sir Davin, is close to you in age. Alysanne liked the blunt and outspoken knight, but Davin had no lands or keep, and her father claimed that after the war, Tywin would force Sir Jaime to leave the Kingsguard. Casterly Rock was a great prize, although she would have to deal with Tywin as good father and Cersei as sister. Both would make her life miserable, and she could not rule the Rock until they died. All things considered, Alysanne would prefer to stay the Lady of the Tooth. We are in a war, auntie. Before making betrothals, we should wait to see who lives and who dies. The war will be over by the end of the year. Janna Vicary said. Once Limond marches west with Sir Stafford, these Starks will bend the knee. And when will that be? A plump blonde asked. My boy says that the other recruits are so green, they cannot even hold a spear. He says that he and Martin Lannister are the only ones who can charge on a war horse. Tybalt says the same. Aunt Kaesella chimed in. He says the Northern Army would cut through Sir Stafford's recruits like Valyrian steel through a wooden shield. Before the other ladies could chastise her for lack of faith, a page rushed into the room. Lady Leford, riders spotted at a distance. Sir Stafford is galloping back to the castle. But why would Stafford come this morning? A puzzled Serena asked. He appears to be chased, my lady, the page said out of breath. Alysanne dashed to the main gatehouse, her 3 personal guards and Aunt Serena in tow. The Golden Tooth had 3 gates, a battle gate looking west, a hunter's gate where herds of goats and cattle could be driven out to graze, and an east gate to the riverlands. That day, only the drawbridge of the battle gate had been lowered over the dry moat filled with tall and rusted spears, staked to the ground. The Castellan handed Alysanne the MY spyglass. She could see Stafford's gilded ringmail in the front with blood crusted on the neck and shoulders. Her uncle led several dozen riders, squires and knights. She could see the black steel armor with 3 golden lions of Lord Jast and the white and red great helm of Sir Limond Vicary. She hoped for the sake of her aunts and cousins that Tybalt and Martin were in the group and unhurt. But who is chasing them? Alysanne wondered aloud. As if in answer, a war horn sounded, a long low blast that rolled from the west. Another horn answered from a ridge to the south, and then other trumpets joined the dirge. It was a terrible sound, a song of vengeance that promised blood. The horns continued the frightful melody. Ai, it is the Northmen, my lady. They have come to kill us all. A guard screamed. How long does it take to raise the drawbridge? Alisan asked coolly. Not long at all, my lady. We could allow Sir Stafford in and then lower the portcullis. The invaders would be fools to charge while we raised the bridge. The Castellan said. Then do so. I will be there to greet my uncle. Alisan said. Order the garrison to man the towers. And have meat and drink prepared for them. Alisan waited at the gatehouse. The watchers on the hall could see clouds of dust and horses in pursuit now. Her 2 aunts and several cousins were with her, and 10 guards stood in the passageway, their spears pointed in the direction of the lowered drawbridge. The horses thundered past as 4 dozen riders galloped through the hall, past the murder holes and into safety. Lower the portcullis, the Castellan yelled. Something was wrong. Tybalt's armor was askew and Lord Vicary carried a great sword, far longer and broader than his normal arms. Her uncle took off his helmet, only it was no Lannister at all. The hair was sandy blonde, not thin tufts of a man going bald. The eyes were a dull brown and the man had a sheepish, almost apologetic look. This was not Stafford Lannister. The riders dismounted and drew swords, maces, and spears. The man who pretended to be Lord Vicary was a giant, nearly 7 foot tall, and with great sword in hand, ambushed her guards. The warrior wearing Lord Just's armor held the spike of a wicked-looking morning star at the neck of the Castellan. Other armed fighters surrounded her shocked aunts and cousins. Lastly, the figure disguised as Tybalt Marbrand vaulted off his horse and unsheathed his sword. He took off the heavy steel helmet. He was tall and young with a long face, dark brown hair and grey eyes so dark and cold they looked almost black. He glanced over the crowd of disarmed guards and terrified ladies and saw that they looked in her direction. Alisan Leford mustered up the remnants of her courage. If she must, she would die with honor. What is your name, my lady? He asked. Alisan Leford. I am the Lady of the Golden Tooth. Tell your men to throw down their weapons, raise the portcullis, and surrender, he said. May I have your name, sir? Alisan asked. I am no sir. Jon Snow, he said. Author's notes. The Valyrian dagger had a bizarre journey in the TV show where Ned Stark kept the dagger, Baelish stole the dagger, and then he weirdly gave it to Bran. I think the TV writers thought it was some sort of poetic justice, but it seemed like extremely heavy-handed foreshadowing. In this one, Catelyn takes said dagger, and Robb eventually has it. After all, he has no other Valyrian steel. Of course it can't happen due to plot armor, but I sincerely believe that if the North allied with the Reach and got the Tyrells to attack from the south, GOT would be over in 2 books. This is obvious to Robb but not so much to Mace. Are the Tyrells great plotters? They start off super strong, with Olenna masterminding Joffrey's death. But man, the Tyrells drop the ball. After they kill off Joffrey, and Tyrion kills Tywine, the clear enemy is Cersei. Kill her and you have won the game. The Tyrells don't know about the dragons or the White Walkers. But they just feuds around. If they could poison a king, why could they not kill Cersei, who is drunk off her ass half the time? I wrote Olenna as being direct and blunt. Some readers might argue she is more subtle, pulling strings from the back. The way I see it, Olenna is a bit of a chameleon. When she deals with Sansa, she can play the poor child card. When she confronts Tywine, she just goes strength for strength. I know you don't like me, but if you lose the Reach, you are screwed. So for Robb, she is somewhere in the middle, and maybe more forceful than the book. I am confused by the whole Jane Westerling plot. It is told from the perspective of Catelyn and Tyrion's dealings with Tywine, but it seems absurdly lucky. They couldn't expect Theon to burn Winterfell, and appear to kill Bran and Orykon, or Robb to get injured and need a buxom nurse. Did Jane's mother somehow dope Robb with love potions? How did her daughter not know that she was being doped with moon tea? To be honest, it seems like Tywine got lucky, and his cryptic comments, Jane Westerling is her mother's daughter and Robb Stark is his father's son, struck me as too all-knowing. In the TV show, of course, it is not honor but love that drives the Theresa May guy twist. My take on the Westerling mess is simpler. Grey Wind scares Jane Westerling, terrifies her mother, and dislikes the Spicer uncle. Trust your dire wolf. If Rob had trusted Grey Wind and John kept Ghost with him at all times, these books would be a lot shorter. The canal in John's mind is modelled off the Erie Canal. It took 8 years to build, and was 350 miles long, 40 feet wide but only 4 feet deep. So only barges could travel on it. John envisions a canal that is less wide but deeper, maybe 10 feet plus, because cogs in the Middle Ages, like the Santa Maria, had a draft of 3 meters. Storm's End, the reach must be full of moorings. I understand Mace is dumb as a doorbell, but what about Randil Tarley? If you couldn't take it in a year, the reach should not worry about Stannis with 5,000 men. I think GRM uses Storm's End as this impregnable castle so he can build up to the Golden Company taking Storm's End. Then people will ooh and ah over fake Egon before he gets his ass kicked. So I think Rob's reaction makes perfect sense. It is in character with how GRM's characters appear with a bang and then just drop the ball. Stafford Lannister's host at Oxcross is a disaster. It goes into military strength. According to sourcebooks, the Westerlands can raise 50,000. But here's the thing, Jaime had 15,000. Tywin has low 20s to 30k. So that is 40k men accounted for. It is hard to get all your military strength. The North can raise 45,000 men, but Robb only raises 16,000. That tells me that Tywin basically took everybody, and to get to the full 50k, he is really scraping the bottom of the barrel. Incidentally, in the Middle Ages, it was hard to raise large armies. People were mostly farmers, so only a few, nobles and kings' households, were truly trained to fight. So it is not trivial to find good fighters. Perhaps this is why the Iron Islands can punch above their weight. They are small crappy islands, but nobody sows, so they have to fight. Still they get their asses handed to them all the time, unless Lucky Euron is around. The capture of the Tooth is based on a Viking story of a Jarl Haystein. He was in stories of quasi-mythic figures like Sigurd Snake Eyes and Ivar the Boneless. He dreamed of sacking Rome. So he has his men carry him into the gate and pretend he was dying and wanted to convert into Christianity. When he got to the church, he jumped off the stretcher and sacked the town. Unfortunately it turned out to be Luna, which is 200 miles away from Rome. Lastly, there is a lot to say about distances and how it affects battle. Let's just put it like this, for Renly to ride from Bitterbridge to Storm's End to confront his brother is incredibly stupid. It is akin to Petyr Baelish popping up from King's Landing to Winterfell and back to the Vale. It makes Season 7 seem contrived. It takes a long time for armies to travel. The Roman army could march 24 miles in 5 hours with all their supplies. But that was why they were so awesome and conquered the world. Any medieval army would take a lot longer. The best mounted soldier in the Middle Ages might move 50 to 60 miles a day, and if he did, he would swiftly outpace his supply lines. I read that some medieval armies were lucky to move 5 miles a day. Chapter 18, The Bloody Wolf Rises. Chapter text. The Bloody Wolf Rises. For 1,000 years, the Golden Tooth guarded the Westerlands from any eastern invasion. Even as House Lannister faced rapacious Greyjoy reavers or quarrelsome Reach nobles, the Lords of the Rock never lost sleep over the fractious Rivermen. The Tooth was unassailable, just like Casterly Rock. Now, the fortress was a gateway for attack, and the rich lands beyond, rugged hills, rolling plains, fertile farms, and prolific mines, were ripe for plunder. After their treachery, the Northern Army consolidated their gains with lightning speed. Daisy Mormont, the woman in Lord Just's black steel plate, blew a blast from her war horn, and in the valleys below, trumpets and horns answered. Soon, North and Rivermen surged into the Tooth, and 1,000 horses milled about the river road. Wagons of prisoners were dragged by hard-bitten warriors to the Tooth. In the castle, the women and children were rounded up in the Great Hall, the master-at-arms and guards forced to surrender and locked in the dungeons, and the Maester and Castellan interrogated. Armed Northmen searched the castle for gold, food, and anyone in hiding or seeking to escape. A giant white wolf with blood-red eyes joined the patrols, terrifying the already frightened ladies of the castle. Alysanne Leford was stunned at the turn of events, from gossiping over lemon cakes to being guarded by she-bears with wicked morning stars in a span of hours. She sat in a corner of the great hall trying to keep her composure. Her aunts, Miranda Lefort, Stafford Lannister's wife, and Cassala Leford, Tybalt's mother, shook with fear, which only worsened when Sir Stafford and Tybalt, along with many other high-born prisoners, were dragged before Jon Snow in chains. Alysanne did her best to soothe the younger children and girls clinging to her and cowering from the Northmen. Maester Heman, Castellan Doggett, and Septon Baldric offered no guidance, as they were as paralyzed as the ladies. Alysanne heard what happened to cities and castles sacked in war, looting and pillage, men and children put to the sword. Slavery was outlawed in Westeros, but after battle, women were carried away to be gang-raped, often killed afterwards. As the lady of the castle, she had some protection, for her father, Lord Leford, would pay a ransom if she was not despoiled, but her maids and servants had none. And in the heat of the moment, even her title might not save her maidenhead from being treated as plunder, particularly by the war leader. None of that happened at the Golden Tooth. The high-born women and any children were placed under tight guard in the great hall. Even maids and female servants were watched by fierce fighters with a black she-bear on their shields. Snow was far more interested in the prisoners, their names, titles, houses, and their parentage rather than loot. The northern soldiers and their commanders had been directed to search for every inch of the castle, but were told that anyone who surrendered would not be harmed. Snow questioned her wailing uncle on the size and composition of the western forces. 2 days ago, Stafford Lannister bragged to admiring ladies how his men would bring House Stark to heel. Now Stafford betrayed the names of all the high-born squires and knights present at Oxcross. And there were many names. Sir Stafford had been tasked to train the new Lannister army at Casterly Rock, and he and his 3 captains were all captured, Sir Rupert Brax, Lord Antonio Just and Sir Limond Vicary. But the North had captured nearly 100 high-born hostages, and half of them young boys who had been pressed into service after the defeats in the Riverlands. Martin Lannister, Sir Kevan's 3rd son, Lord Just's sons, the heir to House Vicary, Lord Prester's son, the bastard of Riverspring, the Serets, the Sarwicks, Robin Morland's nephews, and the Farman boys. There were squires from over 24 noble houses, and to top it off, many lady mothers had come to the safety of the Tooth to say goodbye before their sons went off to war. Now, those departures were postponed, perhaps forever. Lord Snow, a giant of a man with dark brown hair and a thick grizzly beard, reported. A giant 2-handed sword was strapped to his back. 4 of the 5 towers are secure, but a lady and her guards have bolted themselves in the bell tower. They have barricaded the doors. Even though you told them the consequences? Snow asked. I said we would show mercy if they surrendered. And if they didn't, that I would return with more men. Another man, tall and rangy with a long axe, interrupted. What if we set the tower on fire? The smoke would force them out. Such a fire would have to be rather large. And if the winds changed, might be dangerous. Which lady is it? And why would anyone want to hide there? Snow said. No one in the hall answered that question or even met the man's eyes. The leader of the northern army looked more impatient than angry. If my men have to break down the door, I will order them to kill everyone inside. Men or women, small folk or highborn. Septon Baldric gasped. The September is there. It is sacrilege to shed blood in the light of the 7, the fat man thundered. Lucky I follow the old gods then. Lady Leford, which one of your ladies is missing? The Northman was no fool. Alysanne could refuse to answer, but he would find out eventually, and she had no desire to provoke his anger. Lady Lannister. Snow raised his eyebrows. Which one? The Lannisters are a rather fertile house. Your Aunt Miranda is married to Stafford. We have his daughters, Serena and Miriel, here. Lady Dorna Lannister. Sir Kevan's wife. Alysanne responded. No doubt she fled for her younger daughter's safety. Janie is less than 3 days old. She is a fool, then. Her actions only endanger her children. Jon said. Martin Lannister. The boy was dragged to his feet by a Mormont fighter. He was 10 and 1, Willem's twin, although he seemed younger with short blonde hair and no wisps of hair on his chin. At ease, boy. I have your father, Sir Kevan, and your brother, Willem. They have not been mistreated. Smalljan, take him to the bell tower. He will convince his mother to open the door and surrender. If she does not, break Martin's arms and legs, slowly, so his mother can hear the screams. The giant grinned and then left with the frightened boy and a dozen armed warriors. You heartless blackguard! Alisan said. Snow eyed her curiously. If she cares for Martin, the lady will surrender. Fathers and mothers find it hard to see their children suffer, and they will do much to prevent that. And the bastard was proven right. There were no screams or no sounds of fighting. A chastised Dorna Lannister walked to the great hall, clutching her daughter Janie with one arm, and holding Martin's hand. Alisan consoled the lady and her children, and could see the tears in their eyes. Lady Dorna knelt on the ground and held her hands in quiet prayer. Snow did not notice or care. He was too busy examining the lists of prisoners. The sun was still high in the sky when the commanders met in the castle solar. Jon sat in Lord Leford's chair, a gaudy seat carved from the golden wood of the Summer Isles, and decorated with panels of Syrian Lannisters' victories. The great king of the Rock had extended the rule of Casterly Rock to the tooth by defeating an alliance of 3 petty kings. The Mormont girls stood at the window, with Lady Mage, Sir Wendell, and Sir Stephen seated opposite Jon. The Freys, Smalljan and Eddard Karstark were all present, as were Chet and Geryon. Lord Snow. We have found many chests of treasure. Gold and silver coins, ingots, jewels, filigree rings, gold brooches inlaid with garnets, cloison pins, even bolts of silk. I have asked your boy to make a record, so that none will be stolen or lost. Wendell said. I trust your honesty, Sir Wendell, but an inventory will help. I will speak to Robb on how to best use the gold, but a share of the spoils will go to those who captured the castle. Jon said. Snow, you were right about the food, but I doubt that was a guess. The Lannisters have stored an enormous amount of supplies at the castle, sacks of grain, bales of hay, barrels of smoked meats, dried beans, salted fish, and casks of ale. Best of all, there are pens nearby with hundreds of cattle. We can drive that back to Riverrun. There is enough food here to supply our army for 2 or 3 moons. Lady Mormont said happily. The meat and grain will be more valuable than gold. We must find a way to transport it back. Jon stopped when he heard a loud groan from the oldest person in the room. Sir Stephen, what is the matter? Pardon, my lord. I feel ill. Stephen's face had turned a sickly shade of white. Sir Stephen took ill after he chastised Black Walder for looting the Lord's chamber. Walder claimed 3 satin cushions, an ebony footstool, a lady's mirror, and even Lord Leford's bed as loot. Her Winfrey snapped. How does the twit expect to bring back a large bed to the twins? Smalljan asked. Perhaps he will sleep on it, as it floats up the trident. Karstark japed. Snow, besides the loot, the food and the prisoners, there is another urgent matter. What shall we do next? The news of Oxcross will spread like wildfire by tomorrow. Casterly Rock may not know the tooth was taken, but they will no doubt send ravens. In a week's time, the Lannisters will know. Mage said. I say, take the war further west. There are gold and silver mines at Castamaria. Let's seize them. Smalljan declared. Even at last hearth, the singers knew the reigns of Castamaria. Didn't Tywin Lannister flood Castamaria? And we are an army, not miners. And Castamaria is 200 miles away from the Golden Tooth. Wendell said. So was Oxcross from Riverrun, and we still crushed them. The Lannister army is overstretched. The castles might hold, but they cannot defend their countryside. Smalljan said. True, but the 200 miles from Riverrun was mostly in our lands. And there are many strong castles there, Ashmark, the Crag. But Sir Wendell makes a good point. If Tywin Lannister has left the mines flooded, then the veins may have run dry. Jon said. Lord Snow, should we retreat from the tooth? Sir Stephen said, groaning. Retreat? Why should we do that? An outraged Smalljan said. We should be attacking. Are all free knights as cowardly as Lord Walder? Watch your tongue, Umber. You have no reason to question our courage. Perwyn retorted. Sir Stephen is thinking about what the Westermen will do. When they hear that we have captured their women and children, they may besiege the Golden Tooth. Dacey said. The heir to Bear Island was a vicious fighter, as John knew well from sparring, but she was also a voice of reason among the bellicose Northmen. We would defeat these so-called lions. We have plenty of food and water, and the castle is strong. Umber replied. Yes, but they could encircle the castle. They may not have enough men, but a siege would trap us here for weeks. And our forces in the Riverlands could use the supplies. Lady Mage said. I have a plan, my lords and ladies. It may be unpleasant, but it will hurt the Lannisters badly. Chet, bring in Lady Lefford and the Maester. John said. The Lady of the Tooth strode in, head held high. The Maester was not nearly as bold, his eyes looking down on the ground. How far away are other castles from the Tooth? By raven or by horse? John asked. Casterly Rock or Lannisport might take a raven 2 days. But for Ashmark and the Crag, they would get a message by nightfall. And as for horse, well, that depends. A man could leave Ashmark now and get here in a few hours if he drove his horse near death. Silver Hill would be a day's ride. They say that Oxcross is 3 days from Lannisport, but a war horse might be faster. Maester Heman said. I will need your ravens. You will write this message in blood. John said. Blood. The old man squeaked, eyes bulging. Even the small John looked surprised. Yes, blood. John said. Not human blood, you dolt. Chet, kill a pig or a goat. Write that the North has conquered the Tooth and destroyed the army at Oxcross. That we have prisoners, Lady Lefford, Lady Dorna Lannister, Lady Marbrand, and all the squires and heirs. Jast, Brax, Prester, Farman, Marbrand, Serret, Morland. Dispatch the ravens immediately to Ashmark, Deepden, Silver Hill, Hornvale, Casterly Rock, and Lannisport. But, Lord Snow, the Westermen will rush to attack us. Sir Stephen exclaimed. The free air expressed the surprise clearly on the minds of all in the Solar. My uncles and cousins will stop at nothing to bring you down. Alysanne said. John turned to the bold Lady of the Golden Tooth. They can try. As news of John's orders spread, the castle came alive. Mormonts, Marndalis, Carstarks and Umberley soldiers fanned out, examining the towers and gatehouse, checking out the arrow slits and murder holes, and inspecting the melons and crenels of the battlements. Horses were stabled in the Tooth or put out to pasture past the walls facing the Riverlands. Sharpened stakes were placed in the dry moat, and arrows, bolts, and stones were gathered in areas where defenders could return fire. The Golden Tooth did not have the extensive sets of secondary defences of Winterfell, but the rugged terrain and commanding height made the castle a difficult target. A more sensible and ruthless adversary might abandon the lady prisoners to their fate. John doubted that the 3 nearest fortresses, Ashmark, Silver Hill and Hornvale, would react in such a calculating manner. The veteran war leaders were in the Riverlands, leaving at home a motley crew of lords past fighting age and aggressive young knights. Second, the nobles would be outraged by the ravens and the clear threat to their children and wives. In the Westerlands, fostering was common, and many houses sent children to squire with other families. And third, the Western had no idea of the size of the northern forces. At the very least, they would send an army to assess the situation. And given the insulting tone of the raven, John was certain the lords would feel honor bound to lead that host. In time, cooler heads might prevail and the Westermen would realize that a siege would be costly and futile. But Jon Snow would not give them that time. He would force their hand. He finished one last raven for Bitterbridge. It was likely the message for Robb would be intercepted by the Tyrells or Renly Baratheon, but the news would spread soon enough. And his letter carried scant details, only that they had won a battle and then cracked the Tooth. Jon contemplated his plan. It would work, but then they would curse his name, and not just in the West. But what was honor compared to victory? Bloodraven had sacrificed his to save the Targaryens, once at Redgrass Field, and again at the Great Council, when he beheaded in his black fear despite promising safe passage. Jon had sworn to serve and protect his brother in war. If Robb ruled the North with his true-born siblings, that was enough. It did not matter if Jon was disgraced. The lone wolf was not as important as the pack. He descended the stairs with Ghost by his side. There in the great hall, the lords and knights of the north and the riverlands waited. John had directed Chet and Geryon to call for the domestic servants, and they stood anxiously next to the Lady of the Golden Tooth. Over the day, the prisoners had been sorted and sent to makeshift prisons. Even boys as young as 7 name days had been locked away. Only the ladies and the daughters had been allowed to stay. "Why are we here, Snow?" Black Walder called out. The Free Knight had been infuriated when John ordered a halt to any looting. "The Westerland forces will arrive soon, perhaps in a day's time," John said. "We will be ready for them, Lord Snow. We have set up patrols and watches. We will be ready for any attack." Lady Mage said. "We need to prepare for a siege. We have 1,000 prisoners, men, women, children, small folk and highborn. From this moment on, until the Westerlords agree to terms, the prisoners will not eat. No meat or bread shall pass their mouths. Highborn or lowborn, old or young, no food at all," John said. "But there is more than enough bread and meat at the castle," Alisanne Leford said. "Aye, and that is for the army only. Your uncles and cousins wish to defeat me. Let us see how quick they are to battle," John said. "Do you mean to kill us all?" Alisanne cried. "No. Hunger will do that." Tywin Lannister's forces pillaged the riverlands, looting, stealing the food and destroying the fields. Your ladies will see how it feels when your stomach aches for a slice of bread. Then you will understand what your brave lions did," John said. The heir to the Golden Tooth looked at him with hate. The others muttered in shock and Donna Lannister clutched her young daughter to her chest. "These are my orders, and I expect them to be followed. If I find anyone, even my men, feeding the prisoners, they will be thrown from the highest parapet into the moat below," John said. "The old lion will not stand for this. He will take revenge," Lady Janna Vickery said. "Harrenhal is over 400 miles away. You will be long dead before Tywin comes. Let us hope the Marbrands and the Serets are wiser. You can dream of rescue or pray that the Westerlords have sense. I would do the second, for your children's sake," John said. The breakfast was a thin oat porridge with a few slices of apples and a small pitcher of warm cream. The castle was on a war footing, and servants, forbidden from feeding the prisoners, had prepared a minimal meal. John did not bother to take any of the slices of heavy oat bread, warmed over from last night. He had barely dipped his spoon when the Mormont ladies walked into the solar, with Mage in the lead, and frowns on all their faces. "Snow, I could barely sleep last night due to the bawling ladies," Mage said. John had not thought the castle walls were so thin. "It has been less than half a day. Their bellies may be empty but they are not dying from hunger," he said. "I do not want to see any children die," Lady Mage declared. Her daughters clearly agreed. "Neither do I." John put away the meager bowl. "When you swore your oaths to Winterfell, what did Lord Stark pledge?" "That we would always have a place by his hearth and mead at his table. And that he would ask no service that would bring House Mormont dishonor," Lady Mage said. "I. In Ned Stark's name and my brother Robb, I will keep that vow," John said. "So this is all a feint. You don't really mean to starve these prisoners?" Jory said. John shook his head. "Do you know the problem with knights? They have a stick up their ass and always demand to be called sir," Jory said. "That too, but I meant in battle. Knights have a great need to show their bravery and value. They are more concerned about combats with other knights and their personal glory. So they lack discipline and they charge to the fight, when they would be better served to be patient," John said. "The ravens will provoke them. The knights and lords will look weak from the capture of their ladies and squires. They will rush here to prove their courage. What you say may be true, and this castle is certainly strong enough to resist. But a long siege will mean the deaths of many prisoners," Mage said. "The siege will not be long. They are angry, and I will make their wrath will boil over. And angry men are easy to defeat," John said. "All right, Snow. We trust you but I hope you know what you are doing," Lady Mage said. "When we left Riverrun, I planned to strike at the Tooth. That was why I wanted Mormont soldiers as the bulk of my forces. I needed no harm to be done to any prisoners if we took the castle. That is important to getting what I want. John said. But what do you want, Snow? We have the castle. We have secured prisoners, gold and supplies. A puzzled Daisy asked. Much more than that. And for that, I need fear. Fear cuts deeper than swords. John said. It was still early in the morning when Wendell Marndaly brought the prisoner to the solar. Tybalt Marbrand walked in, hands shackled and face dirty from sleeping on the floor. The blond boy met John's gaze with somber but steady eyes. No one could doubt Tybalt's courage. He was remarkably composed for a boy of 10 and 1. Do you know why you are here? John said. Tybalt nodded. I broke my oath. I swore not to raise arms against the Northmen, but I joined my uncle's host at Oxcross. And what is the punishment for oath-breakers in the Westerlands? John asked. The boy did not blink. Death. For nobles, a beheading. For others, a hanging. Or if a point needs to be made, a crow's cage like the one for Uncle Tyrion. Do you wish to die? John said. No, sir. But I will not beg for my life. It was wrong to break my oath. Tybalt stopped. May I write a raven? To say goodbye to my sister Jane at Ashmark. She has only 8 name days. John tapped his fingers on the desk. No. Any raven sent from the Golden Tooth will be mine. I will decide your fate today. But the guards will take you now to your mother, Lady Marbrand. Spend the remaining hours with her. Tybalt nodded, and then walked off with Marndaly men. The boy was brave, John thought, and deserved a better fate. War though demanded a price paid in blood. The trumpet blew first, and then the sentries on the walls raised the alarm. It was a cold dreary day, and the mists persisted into the early afternoon. Only then did the army appear outside the castle. From Ashmark had come Lord Damon Marbrand with burnished bronze armor and a cloak of bronze and smoke grey. A wedge of Marbrand knights under their banner of a burning orange tree on a smoking field formed the bulk of the cavalry. There were other mounted lancers wearing the sigil of the purple unicorn on a silver field and a peacock in his pride on cream. House Brax and House Serret were the 2 closest houses to the Golden Tooth. There were dozens of other banners held aloft by tired men on tired horses, Leydens, Baneforts, Swyfts, Paines, and Sarwicks. Many of those must have ridden through the night. Besides Lord Marbrand's white charger, a big man rode on a large bay destrier in gilded ringmail. Such mail was not uncommon in the West, but only a Lannister would so openly display the gold lion on crimson. With a spyglass, John could see the roaring lion on the great helm, the heavy pauldrons and a crimson fox fur cloak. That one had to be Sir Davin Lannister, and John reckoned that Stafford's son would be eager to avenge his father. The sun glittered off the points of 400 lances and 3 times as many spears. The force was smaller than John's host, but he had no doubt that this was only the vanguard. In a day or two, or perhaps even that night, foot soldiers would link with the cavalry, bringing archers, crossbowmen, and supply wagons. John stood up and summoned his commanders. He ordered the guards to bring the prisoners as well. Let's give a proper welcome to the Lannister army. They assembled on the highest tower facing west, overlooking the gatehouse and the drawbridge that the Northmen had stormed only a day ago. John gazed through the spyglass out in between the 2 melons, built high enough to give archers complete protection, and to hide the catapult behind him. It would take an extraordinary shot to hit the catapult with a siege weapon. Shooting from the tower roof offered no such difficulty, which was why Lannister forces remained a quarter of a mile away. Even the best archer would need a powerful longbow to reach such a great distance. Who has the best eyes among us? John asked, holding out the spyglass. Lyra does. She can hit a shadowcat from 120 paces away with a spear. Jory said, to her sister's delight. That's not so hard. I can do that too, as can any man of the last hearth. You have to be a good hunter and tracker when you live in the true north. Smalljan boasted. John handed Lyra the spyglass. She looked out into the crowd of fluttering banners and men pitching tents. Snow, what do you expect me to see? It is just a lot of cunts with fancy signs on their shields and horses. Lyra said. John sighed. The men in front, Lyra, presumably they are the leaders. Their sigils and anything unusual. Well, there is the blondie that Daisy smacked around on the last day. He had a big chin, and hair like a little Ponzi girl. Although he has grown a beard and a mustache, so not ladylike. There are a bunch of people wearing orange trees. Lyra said. One of them is old with white hair. There is another one next to him, and he is pointing his fingers at the castle. How old is he? John asked. Not as old as the old man, that's for sure. Lyra said, as her sisters snorted. Maybe 5 days older than Daisy. That may be Laurent Marbrand, Lord Damon's second son. Was he at Ashmark? John asked the crowd of prisoners. My father and my grandfather were both at our family castle. Tybalt answered. Good, bring out the other prisoners. John said. 5 men were forced onto the roof escorted by a dozen warriors. These were not ladies, or the children of Western nobles, or Stafford Lannister. They were the guards that had served Dorna Lannister when she fled to the September. This one is the captain, a Mormont man said, pushing forward a burly man with bushy hair. Thank you. I will take it from here. John said. He took the rope and tied several knots about the man, over and through the arms, and at the ankles. There was a stunned silence, as John made certain there could be no movement. John beckoned to Smalljan and Eddard Karstark. With the help of the 2 tall men, they half carried and half dragged the prisoner to the catapult. The Lannister man began to scream when he realized that he was about to be placed in the bucket of the long wooden arm. By the 7. Stafford Lannister gasped. Snow, you promised the prisoners mercy if they surrendered. Alysanne Leford said. But these ones didn't surrender. Lady Lannister's guards barricaded the bell tower. They did not take Smalljan Umber's offer, and only when Lady Dorna ordered them to open the door, did they give up. John said. Do you have any last words? The prisoner was too frightened to answer, and the Smalljan and Eddard held the arms and hands while John cranked the winch, with the help of Jerry and Chet. The arm bent down, as the frame tensed with potential energy. My lord, the men only did what I asked. They merely followed orders. Dorna said. Wrong orders. He aimed the catapult directly at Sir Davin and the 2 Marbrands. It would not reach the command tent of course, but the Westermen would hear and see the fate of the guard. John counted down with his right hand, and as he lowered the last finger, Smalljan and Eddard backed away. The arm swung forward, hurling the Lannister man high into the sky, like a fat wiggling worm. The screaming guard plummeted down to the ground, crashing with a loud thud 200 yards away, and even without the spyglass, John could see blood pooling on the ground. We have 4 others. John began to tie down the second man, and the Mormonts stood by, weapons ready for any resistance. He had used a bit too much of rope on the guard captain, and would try to be less wasteful with the others. This is shameful, sir. Sir Stafford said. And to do so in front of these ladies, whose tender eyes should not be exposed to such violence. John chuckled. I am sure they know men die in war. The Smalljan had gagged the man rather than listen to his pitiful mewling. The lever sprang again, and the second guard was hurled in the same trajectory as the first, landing only a few yards away. More rope. Snow, they are looking this way now. That Lannister knight, and the 2 tree people. Lyra said. Good. John looked at the cowering captives. Don't worry, Sir Stafford. You are too valuable to kill. We are indebted to you for Oxcross and the Golden Tooth. I would rather hurl one of your 2 daughters over the wall first. And Tybalt, this will not be how you will die. The blond boy nodded grimly, while many ladies and children burst into sobbing. It was clear that the bastard of Winterfell felt no mercy. John continued tying the knots. 3 more guards would be enough to convey a serious message to the Westerlords. John sat in the solar, examining the different specimens of the willow tree. There was the green weeping willow, the sigil of House Rajar. There was the white willow, whose leaves were paler and flowers were longer, no doubt to attract bees. In the north, there were dwarf willows that were more shrubs than trees. Still, the bark shares the same quality, although John was hard-pressed to figure out how to measure it effectively. Pain was a difficult thing to compare. He heard a knock on the door. John put the samples away to the side. Daisy walked in, escorted by Winfrey. My mother wants to know when you wish to speak with the Westermen. They have sent messengers to the castle under a flag of parley. Tell Lady Mage later today. But I only wish to see their leaders, and I will speak to them with House Mormont, and other Northmen present. Daisy nodded and turned to go. Pawin did not. What is the matter, Pawin? John asked. Lord Snow, it is Sir Stephen. He has gotten much weaker today. Pawin said. Bring him to the Maester's room. I will see him there. John said. Stephen Free looked more tired than a man of 66 named Dace should. The skin of his face and his mouth were dry as dust and he gasped for air, breathing in shallow bursts on the table. John swiftly measured his pulse, felt the temperature, and examined his eyes. Maester, the injury is on my hip. Should I remove my clothes? Stephen asked. John had no desire to see a half-naked Free. No need for that, yet. How does your head feel? Dizzy. Everything seems blurry. Stephen said. He threw up twice this morning, Lord Snow. He could only keep down a bit of water. John felt the wrist again and measured the rapid and irregular heartbeat. Do you see yellow? Stephen gawked at John like he was an Isozi warlock. But. How did you know? I had not told Pawin and he was with me all day. You are not injured, Sir Stephen. You are poisoned. If you ate the leaves of the foxglove plant, you would have these symptoms: blurred vision with a yellow tint, nausea, dilated pupils, a changed heartbeat. A small amount would make your heart pump faster, but too much can kill. Someone gave you this, either in your food or on your skin. John said. It must be Black Walder. When you were injured at Oxcross, he gave you an ointment to apply to the scrape. Pawin said. He could have mashed up the seeds and leaves into a paste. Clever of him. It is an uncommon poison, unlike powdered greycaps or nightshade. John said. Will I die, Snow? Will I never see my children again? Stephen wailed. Given that Black Walder was his eldest son's child, John had grave doubts about the intelligence of that comment. I can treat the poison. It is important you drink as much water as possible. And Kingskipper. John took out a large bunch of the reddish-brown herb. I will brew this into a poultice and you should apply it to all the areas that the balm touched. I will also give you some willow bark for any pain. It will help keep the nausea down, so you can get some food. Many thanks, my lord. Stephen said. What will you do about Black Walder? John asked. I am not certain what we can do. He took back the balm, and will likely have thrown it away. We will not be able to prove it. Pawin said angrily. He is kin, and family is important. Stephen said. Your grandson tried to become a kinslayer. Black Walder failed only because Pawin came to me this afternoon. Had he waited a few more days, you would be dead. John said. Life at the Twins is different, sir. My father, Lord Walder, says that family and blood are the most important things. Stephen said. The old man closed his eyes and John began to mix the pungent concoction of Kingskipper, fire milk and willow bark. The younger Free thanked him profusely, but John thought Pawin's attention should have been focused more on Black Walder. He doubted that this would be the last attempt and wondered who else had been involved. The hall was silent that night when the 4 representatives of the Westerlands entered, the 2 Marbrands, Sir Davin Lannister, and a nameless Sarsfield knight. They wore mail shirts, but had been forced to leave their weapons at the gatehouse, and searched once more on the approach to the Great Hall. John sat with the small John at his left and Lady Mormont at his right. Had Sir Stephen been well, the Free Knight might have taken the seat to John's left, but the meeting was dominated by Northmen, Mormonts, Marndalis, Karstark and Umber. Lady Alysanne sat next to Mage, and the other noblewomen huddled nearby with children. The Marbrands and Sir Davin looked with concern at Tybalt and his mother, and with a bit of disgust at Sir Stafford, who stared glumly at the table. Daemon Marbrand was a stately lord, whose long hair and beard had turned white with the years. He walked with a limp, a wound from the Battle of the Fair Isle. The bard sang the sea turned red from my unborn blood when Stannis Baratheon had bottled the Iron Fleet up in those straits. Clearly, the blood of others had also been shed there. His second son, Laurent, had dark copper hair combed back on a pale unsmiling face. Sir Laurent clenched his hands tightly, as if he wished to draw a sword. House Marbrand was one of the principal houses of the Westerlands, but Lord Marbrand deferred to Sir Davin. The knight with the shaggy blonde hair, bristling beard, and thick side whiskers was a Lannister, and that gave him command even in the presence of the most powerful retainers. Snow. Sir Davin grunted as he sat down first, followed by the other Westerlords. Quick introductions were made, and the two Marbrands sat at the right and left of Sir Davin. Davin glanced around, and then raised his bushy eyebrows. Snow, where is the bread and salt? I have not granted you guessed right. And even if you did, nothing would be served. We are not in the habit of feeding enemies. Lady Lefford, please explain. Jon said. The heiress of the Golden Tooth smiled bitterly. Lord Snow has declared that prisoners are not to eat. They have not fed anyone for the last day, and that includes ladies and children. Do you mean to force us to depart by this cowardly behavior? Laurent Marbrand demanded. Retreat if you like. Your women and children will still not be fed. Jon said. The Westermen gnashed their teeth, and Sir Laurent and the Sarsfield man reddened with rage. Lord Damon reacted with greater composure. Come, sir. We can be reasonable men. I was at Pike when your father led the charge. It was a strange castle, more like stacks of rocks about to fall into the sea. Ned Stark was a good man. He would not treat women and children like this. Ned Stark is dead. He was a prisoner as well. And his head was chopped off at the steps of the Great September of Baelor. Jon said. Because he committed treason against the Iron Throne. He confessed to the crowd. Sir Laurent said hotly. Jon stared at the younger Marbrand, before turning back to Sir Davin. Men of honor do strange things when their children are threatened. They tell me that my sister Sansa is beaten often in front of the court, and yet she writes a letter declaring our father a traitor to her dear sweet Joffrey. What do you think your wives and mothers will do to save their children? What will they say when their children beg the servants for a scrap of bread? Jon said. What do you want, Snow? You treated the prisoners fairly at Riverrun. We want our families safe. Do you want gold and silver for your captives? Sir Davin asked. I want Ned Stark returned alive. My sisters, Sansa and Arya, safe home at Winterfell. And Joffrey's head on a pike. Jon said. Sir Davin snorted. You know those terms cannot be met. The first is impossible, and for the second and third, we do not rule the Iron Throne. If you cannot give me what I want, why should I grant you anything? Jon said, equally blunt. More men will come. We have 1,500 now. In a week's time, it will double. And then double again, and so long as you hold the children of the Westerlands, our numbers will rise. I admit you have won your battles, but we can still win the war. I can grant you fair terms. You will allow you to leave the castle with your plunder but free the children and the noble women. It is a better deal than Tywin Lannister would give. Davin said. Jon laughed. I saw your forces at Oxcross. Callow boys and greybeards who fled from the first charge. Sir Stafford emptied the docks and brothels of Lannisport for his army. Your fighters are east at Harrenhal. Lord Crickehall spoke to me proudly of his empty castle and his 3 sons serving with Tywin. Even if all of the garrisons in the west muster for the attack, I may still win at the Golden Tooth. Your men do not even encircle the castle. Will you conduct a siege only from the western side? Your threats are empty, Lannister. Jon said. The men are green. But we can bring a lot of them. There are thousands who survived the Battle of the Camps. Even at Oxcross, there are sellswords and freeriders that have escaped. Sir Forley Prester is no fool, and he is gathering men at Case and Feast fires. Davin said. Jon shrugged. That will take weeks. By then, the Golden Tooth will be a charnel house full of dead children. And let's say the Westerlands assemble their mighty host of potboys and mercenaries in front of the Tooth. What if the North wins? Robb won at the Whispering Wood and the Camps. We won again at Oxcross. If we smash your men at the Tooth, the West would be defenseless. The North could pillage and plunder without mercy. Your castles might stand, but your remaining lords would be trapped, sitting behind walls while their lands burn. The old lion. Sir Laurent started. Yes, yes. Tywin Lannister will fly over Riverrun in a winged chariot and save all of you. I did not realize a lion was half a falcon. Jon gaped before a cold smile crossed his face. If the North defeats your forces at the Tooth, it would please me greatly to see Lord Tywin back to the west. We would prepare him a welcome that he would not soon forget. Daemon Marbrand spoke before his outraged son. Lord Snow. Men die in war, but that will never change. But women and children do not need to die from hunger. Even as enemies, we can come to such an arrangement. There is something. Lord Lefford used the Tooth to hold supplies, food that he intended to ship east to Lannister forces at Riverrun. We want that food. Jon said. But. A perplexed Lord Daemon looked at the equally surprised Lady Lefford. You already have it, sir. You have captured those supplies. Alysanne said. No, you misunderstand. I want you to continue those shipments, the bounty of the Westerlands to be shipped to the Tooth. If the supplies continue, I will feed the ladies and the prisoners. And then the stores will be sent to Riverrun. Jon said. You cannot expect that. We would be feeding the northern armies. Sir Davin said. Exactly. But your women and children would survive. We would not raid further into the Westerlands. Jon said. We cannot speak for House Lannister. Ashmark must follow Casterly Rock. That is true for all of the houses sworn to the Lion. Lord Daemon said. Tywin Lannister is far away. And the prisoners are starving now. But you can decide whether his good opinion matters more than the sons and daughters of the Western houses. And there is another matter. Tybalt. Step forward. Jon said. The tall blonde boy stood up, and walked forward. His mother clung to his elbow, unshed tears in her eyes. Jon tossed a silver stag. Surprised, the boy caught the coin in his right hand. Snow, can we not pay a ransom for the boy? Sir Davin asked. An oath is an oath. Tybalt Marbrand broke his sworn oath. Bring me a block. Jon said. You would kill a boy in front of his mother and father. The Susfield man said in outrage. Among the ladies present, only Alysanne Lefford did not gasp with shock. Jon did not respond to the comment. There was no point defending himself, and his actions would be clear soon enough. Chet handed him the doeskin bag, and he took out 3 items, a sharp thin knife in a leather scabbard, a small glass jar of a thick white liquid, and a strange contraption, a long leather belt with a sturdy bronze screw attached near the buckle. Chet moved off to the side and thrust a small cleaver into the fire. Jon took Tybalt's right arm and made 2 thin slashes near the wrist with the thin blade. He unscrewed the jar and applied milk of the poppy to both cuts. Then he wrapped the leather belt tightly about the forearm, eliciting a grunt when he turned the screw and the heavy bronze press bit into flesh. What can you feel? Jon asked. I cannot feel my arm or my wrist, Maester Snow. The boy said, perplexed. Jon took the short and sharp cleaver from the fire. He placed Tybalt's wrist on the block, and to the shock of the crowd, Jon slammed the blade down, slicing the right hand cleanly off. There was an initial gush of blood, but Tybalt did not scream unlike his fainting mother and his enraged father. The boy was brave, Jon thought, and deserved a better fate. He took out a linen square and dipped it into a pale red liquid. This will sting. Jon said. He applied the fire milk to the open wound. Tybalt's blood mixed with the lighter red of the ointment. Jon tightened the bronze screw on the belt again, and then took out another small jar. This liquid was white but much thinner than the milk of the poppy. Take this. Only a little bit at a time, but it will reduce any pain. Jon said, motioning to Chet. You bastard. Sir Laurent yelled, lunging over the table for Jon, only to be held back by Sir Davin and Lord Daemon. Stop, Laurent. Davin said. We are under the flag of parley. Your son is hurt but not dead. And the dire wolf would kill you even if the guards didn't. Ghost's red eyes glinted in the firelight but the wolf made no move to attack. He broke his oath, and he lost his hand. Jon said, as the Winter Town boys took a stone-faced Tybalt from the room. But hunger is different. That may cost him his head. You may wait for the great Tywin Lannister to return west, but your children do not have much time. Jon waited in the darkness, alone with his thoughts under the waning crescent moon. There were dozens and dozens of armed Northmen close by, and Eddard Karstark, Small Jon Umber, and the Mormont girls had all volunteered when he explained the plan. Silence was of paramount importance, so no one, not even the voluble Small Jon, spoke. They camped atop the once hidden goat trail, that wound down the defile to the valley below. The track was stony and narrow, and men marching up or down could hide easily behind ridges and rocks. Even without darkness, Leford guards had not caught a single glimpse when northern and riverland forces sallied forth to Oxcross. Jon would not let the Marbrands return that trick. Fire was forbidden, so the men and women had little to do but peer into the night, wondering if the Westermen would attack. Only one man in four was awake, with others dozed, confident that those on patrol would raise the alarm swiftly. Many stretched out on the dirt and rocks, wrapped up in furs and thick cloaks. Jon had no need to rest that night, nor did he waste energy staring into the dark. He considered his visions, the doom of Valyria and the eruption of the 14 flames, Lord Bloodraven and the Great Bastards, and finally the Targaryen princesses, consumed by the Iron Throne. The last princess haunted his dreams, tall and slender in a pale sleeveless pink dress with white lace, a sharp contrast to her cinnamon brown skin. She smiled impishly and reached for him with her arms. Her eyes were not the dark brown, and near black, of her mother and the Martells. They were like her father's, deep purple and indigo. Beloved. Rhaenys whispered. But that could not be. Rhaenys Targaryen died 16 years ago, butchered with her infant brother before her mother. She had been stabbed 100 times, her bloody body presented as a war trophy by the Lannisters. Jon was no fool with a head full of songs and stories. In life, the monsters won and Rhaenys had not been smuggled out of the Red Keep. Beloved, she whispered again, the purple eyes twinkling with mischief. Jon wondered if he was going mad. The Targaryens danced close to the edge of madness, and those that dreamed often fell over. But if this was madness, then it was a lovely vision. And in some less cruel world, Rhaenys would have lived, a sweet gracious girl who grew up to be a kind and clever maiden. She had a small black kitten, named Balerion after the great black dragon of Aegon I. The girl died, but perhaps the cat still lived, skulking in the shadows of the Red Keep. The dire wolf broke the reverie, prodding Jon with a nuzzle, the hard garnet eyes looking down the trail. Jon could feel the tension under the thick white fur and the anxiety of the hunt. Ghost had picked up the scent of the Westermen. In the wolf's wood, the pack of dire wolves could locate elk and deer miles away by smell alone. It was time, and Jon stood up, whispering to the men on watch and ordering that everyone be roused but remain silent. There was still no sign of the enemy, but Jon had no doubt in Ghost's senses. The path down the pass began at a large clearing, off to the side of the river road. Mormont men stood next to the road and formed a sturdy shield wall several rows strong, with long spears ready to thrust. The steel shields, painted with a rampant black bear, would be the first sight and possibly the last sight the Westermen would see. Multiple lines of archers were hidden behind rocks, positioned on the curve of a semicircle. Jon crouched on one side with Ghost and the Mormont girls. On the other side, the Small Jon, Eddard Karstark, and Pewinfrey waited, ready to spring. Jon had told the other commanders to spring the trap only when at least a dozen Westermen emerged. I think I hear something. Jory whispered, on Jon's right. After a moment, Daisy chimed in quietly. Aye, there are faint sounds. Just beyond the clearing, the shadowy forms of warriors, stepping forward in a crouch behind shields, appeared. Jon raised his hand, signaling to the archers to wait. In the gloom, he could see a mixture of sigils, burning trees, green arrows, purple stars, and black spears. Sir Davon's crimson lion was not among them. There was no longer any need for silence. Draw! Jon cried. Behind him, a dozen bows were knocked. The darkness made precision impossible, but archers shooting in a line did not need to be that accurate. Loose! The shafts flew into the air. Some landed harmlessly on rocks or shields, but others struck home, eliciting screams of pain. The shafts continued to fly into shadowy shapes. From the trail, a voice cried loudly. Forward! Charge! For Casterly Rock! Men rushed into the clearing, brandishing swords and uttering battle cries. The words were different for each house, but they sounded much like Lord Roland Crickehall none so fierce chant, a mixture of courage and stupidity. The shield wall marched forward, announcing their fearsome presence. The front rank knelt, extending their spears at a low angle, the butts braced against the rocky ground, blades jutting at thighs and knees. The second rank pressed closely behind, shields interlinking and the spears extended at the height of the chest. The last rank strapped their shields on their backs, and held the spears with both hands in an overarm thrust over the doubled shields in front. The steel wall had few weaknesses and multiple layers of stabbing blades. Even as the Westermen realized the danger in front, the Northmen attacked from the sides. Ghost ripped apart men effortless, biting through throats and mauling arms. Lyra, Jory, and Daisy caved in the right side, battering men to the ground, while the Smalljan and Eddard engaged from the left. John swept out with the halberd, a two-handed polium with three methods of attacking, the axe blade, a long spike, and a hook on the back. John used the last to drag enemies to the ground. The Westerman attack had failed. They began to retreat, inching their way back to the trail with shield raised. The warriors in front were too disciplined to flee. The Smalljan grabbed a massive stone with both hands, and with a guttural cry, hurled it over his head. It thudded to the ground, partially blocking the entrance to the goat trail. The knights were trapped and would be forced to turn to run, exposing themselves to spears and swords in the back. "Archers! Shoot at the trail," John said. The lines of archers lifted their bows to the sky, and rained volley after volley of arrows on the path. Men crouched behind shields. The shower of arrows was more scenic than effective. Unlike the raven's teeth, John's archers were not shooting from great height or with powerful weirwood bows. The hail of arrows halted the enemy in their tracks, making them easy prey for the attack on three sides. The Westermen, jammed into a small space, began to surrender and throw down their weapons. John examined the shields for the sigil of the burning orange tree on a grey field. He found Sir Laurent, surrounded by other House Marbrand knights and men-at-arms. Laurent had been wounded on his right shoulder. It did not appear lethal, unlike the torn-off limbs and ripped bellies that spilled blood and guts on the rocky ground. "Snow, we have captured over 24 and killed thrice that number. There may be more bodies lying on the trail as well," Daisy said. "I doubt they will attack again, but set up a guard near the entrance. 30 spearmen could hold the path against 10 times their number. And build a wall to protect our fighters against any ranged attack. And for our archers to fire under cover," John said. "How in the seven hells did you know we would attack?" Sir Laurent gasped. "This path was hidden when Ghost discovered it. But only 2 days ago, 2,000 men rode their horses down the trail. You would have to be blind and dumb not to find it. I knew that the Westermen would thirst for revenge, and what better way than to surround our castle by surprise. But night work is not night's work, sir. You fell into a trap," John said. "And what will happen? Will you starve us to death or kill us here?" Laurent said. "That depends on your father. Let us hope he is wiser than his son," John said, as the new captives were taken into the castle. John did not sleep that night. When they returned to the castle, Maester Heman examined the prisoners under the eyes of John and the Winter Town boys. The battle had been one-sided and few Northmen had suffered even a minor wound. The Westermen were in worse condition, but the injured received good care. Sir Laurent would recover the full use of his right arm. Unlike Riverrun, the Golden Tooth was well supplied with fire milk, vinegar and dream wine. Then he sent for Lady Mormont and Wendell Mondaly. Even Sir Stephen managed to make it to the Solar, much due to the chagrin of Black Walder. The Smalljan, Eddard Carstark, Lyra and Jory also attended, happy to recount their own part of the battle, while Daisy Mormont took charge of the castle defense. Smalljan took great delight in exaggerating the size of the rock he hurled. In a few days, the stone would grow into a boulder, the boulder would weigh more than a horse, and the Smalljan would strike down a dozen men with one mighty toss. The Northmen toasted and laughed when John spoke about their success. No one asked questions about the prisoners. Their fate was clearly in John's hands. Later, he sat alone in the Solar, the other commanders having retired to bed. The light of outside had turned a soft shade of blue, the color of the sky in that short period when the sun hung below the horizon. It was a good time to think, to plan, and to reflect over the events of the past few days and the battles to come. But when Jon closed his eyes, all he saw was her, Rhaenys Targaryen, and her sweet gentle smile. She had only had 3 names days when she died. And now, Jon was using children as human shields to damage the Lannisters. Lady Dorna's daughter Janie had only 3 name days as well. The girl had not died but with no food, that could change quickly. Bloodraven told Jon that he was a dragon hidden as a wolf. Was that a lie? Jon did not know, but the dreams were too strong to ignore. Dragons answered to neither gods nor men. If Rhaenys had a dragon and not a kitten, the Lannisters would have been served fire and blood. The castle was quiet in the early hours of morning. Jon inspected the many towers, making the rounds only with Ghost at his side. He could have watched through a raven, but he wanted to receive reports from the many lookouts posted last night. The high turrets of the Golden Tooth commanded an excellent view of the countryside, and yet, no one had seen the battle last night. The watchers on the wall certainly heard the commotion, and saw shapes retreat in the darkness, but the goat trail remained hidden from their eyes. That morning, there had been little activity in the Lannister camp, save for a few stragglers joining the Western army. They were too small in number to make up for the casualties of the night skirmish. Jon made his way to the infirmary. As he passed, the guards stood taller and the servants shrank back. No one met his eyes. No one dared touch the White Wolf at his side. There were a dozen makeshift pallets for the wounded Westerman. A tired Maester Heman greeted him at the door. Jon told the old man to rest, and Chet took him to the curtained-off bed where Tybalt Lannister dozed, half asleep. He examined the boy's right arm. The tourniquet was still attached, but Chet had followed the orders of gradually loosening the screw. The wound was clean from the fire milk, the bleeding had stopped, and the skin slowly beginning to scab under the bandages. Then Jon noticed a few crumbs of bread hidden under Tybalt's doublet. Chet, who was alone with Tybalt last night? Jon asked. Just the Wintertown boys, Maester. We never let Heman alone with him. I watched him for most of the night, but Jerry helped when I needed a few winks. Chet admitted. Bring Jerian to me. The blond green-eyed boy flinched slightly when he saw Jon's stern face. Jerry may have been no bastard, but he could sense trouble. Jerry, what do you have to say? Jon asked as Chet averted his eyes. The words came out in a rush. Maester, I did feed him, but he was suffering. I gave him a stoop of barley stew and half a heel of bread. I thought war was strategies and battles, not starving prisoners. The boy said, eyes downcast. Wars make monsters of us all. Jon said. I fed a few others, sir. Martin Lannister and the little girl. I am sorry, and I will accept my punishment. Jerry admitted. Jon sighed. Somehow among the dozens and dozens of prisoners, Jerry had found his cousins. I promised your mother you would be safe. I understand your feelings. Be more discreet. Jon said. Maester. Chet said, tugging on Jon's arm. He is waking up. Tybalt Marbrand sat up and looked around groggily. The boy's green eyes became alert when he saw Jon. Lord Snow, the boy said. How do you feel this morning? Jon interrupted. The boy looked at his maimed arm. It is strange. I feel no pain, but... I thought milk of the poppy made you sleepy. Milk of the poppy was used only once. Last night and this morning, you drank a distillation of willow bark. It relieves pain, but too much can be a poison as well. Jon said. Tybalt began once more. Lord Snow, I heard the new prisoners come in during the night. Maester Heman says that my father was among them. He was injured but should recover. Jon said. My lord, I beg mercy for my father. He only wished to rescue me. Surely you can see that. If your lord father attempted to save you, that would be expected. Please. Tybalt said. Except Jon's lord father was dead. Laurent Marbrand had attempted to encircle the castle. Any attempt to rescue Tybalt would have raised alarms at the castle. And the strategy to control the river Radas would have failed when Sir Willis Mandaeli arrived in a day or two. A few thousand more northern troops would have smashed the Lannister forces. But the boy was pleading for his family, and Jon could not begrudge his spirit. Mercy in war is not easy. But I will take into account your request. Do you feel well enough to walk? Jon said. Tybalt nodded. Jon gave orders and then opened the curtain, allowing the early morning sun to stream into the corner. He walked the boy over to see his father, Laurent Marbrand. Soon, Chet came back with Lady Kaesella. The parents hugged their son, and Jon left the small family alone, but under heavy guard. Jon sat at the table with only Mage Mormont and Alysanne Leford as the Westermen trudged into the solar. That morning, the Lannister camp had raised a flag for parley, and Davon Lannister and Daemon Marbrand were escorted through the castle. The Lord of Ashmark had aged a great deal in a day. My son? Daemon asked. Wounded, but he should recover. He is with his wife and Tybalt now. Jon replied. Was it only his idea to attack? We told the idiot not to be a hero. And that we should scout the trail in the morning first. Sir Davon snorted. Where do we go from here, Snow? Do you plan to starve everyone still? Daemon asked. I have not changed my demands. I want food and supplies for my men. Give me that, and there will be no fighting, not in the Westerlands at least. Jon said. Lord Tywine will be wroth, but I will not see my son, good daughter, and only grandson die. I cannot speak for the lords, but Ashmark will withdraw. Daemon said. And what about you, Sir Davon? Will you watch as your father, mother, and 2 younger sisters starve? Jon said. Snow, you really are a bastard. And I am not referring to your birth. Tywine may have my head for this. Davon rubbed his thick brown beard. If we deliver what you ask, how do we know you will keep your part of the bargain? How do we know you won't rape the women or kill the boys? How have you been treated, Lady Leford? Jon turned to the heir of the tooth. You mean besides not being fed for 2 days and watching children go hungry? Alysanne snapped before gaining her composure. Sir Davon and Lord Marbrand, the Northmen have not harmed us. They have protected the women, and I have not seen or heard of any abuse. I will make you this promise. So long as you send the supplies we ask, the prisoners will not be harmed. I swear that on the honor of House Stark. When the war ends, they will be returned to you, safe and sound. Jon said. Very well. You will have the grain and meat. Today, we will send what supplies we have in camp. And we will deliver shipments to the Tooth every se'night. Davon answered. Jon looked at Davon carefully. The knight was outspoken and surly but seemed honest, and had a great deal of authority. There were few men who could speak for House Lannister in the West. I promise to treat the prisoners well. But if you send thieves in some foolish scheme, or smuggle men in the sacks of grain and meat, then they will all suffer. I will answer such tricks harshly, and the blood of your ladies and children will be on your heads. Davon nodded. We will not forget your words, Snow, he said. Jon could not tell whether that was meant to be a threat. Lord Marbrand, I will return your son Laurent and the men we captured yesterday. Why would you do that, Snow? Davon asked suspiciously. Sir Laurent is hot-headed, but his son is more sensible. Tybalt pled for his father. It is his boon that I grant. We do not need thousands of captives. We will set free the low-born prisoners also after they swear oaths not to raise arms against the North or to attack the Riverlands. Or do you plan to break your word if Sir Laurent is returned? Jon said. I care for the lives of my good daughter and grandson as well. And many Lefords are related to me. It is not for my son alone that I fear. Lord Daemon said. Don't think this changes anything, Snow. House Lannister will seek revenge. Davon cried. That definitely was a threat. I look forward to Lord Tywine's response. Jon replied. The guards escorted Sir Davon and Lord Daemon to the infirmary. Jon gave orders to have a large lunch prepared for the prisoners. The Wintertown boys rushed away to deliver that message to the kitchen and the dungeons. Alysanne Leford looked wary, but slunk away to tell her aunts and other ladies. After the Westerman and lady had left, Mage Mormont stood up to go, but turned first to Jon. You spared many lives, but they still hate and fear you. They spit even on your mercy. John shrugged. Deeds matter, not words. They made promises and so have I. So long as we get the food. Lady Mormont, I would ask that you hold the tooth for the north. Any fresh recruits from the west would need to march far south on the Gold Road. The march would be exhausting and they would be too late to help. The supplies from the west will keep the soldiers and horses well fed. I trust your fighters to behave and stay on guard. Snow. She hesitated. Would you have let them die? The babes and the womenfolk. I am a wolf. I would kill to defend my pack. Even as he spoke, the words sounded hollow to John. He was not just a wolf, as Bloodraven noted. Why else would he dream of Rhaenys? You are a bloody wolf, Snow. What will you do after the tooth? Mage said. Go east. I have a lion to kill. John said. Author's notes. Rape happened a great deal in military combat, so Lady Leford's fears are realistic. Women were seen as war loot. My impression is that rape was even more prevalent outside of Europe. The Mongols, the model for the Dothraki, minus the awesome archery, were brutal. So Cersei's brilliant plan of group suicide in the Red Keep is not without reason. In the books, Willem Lannister and Shenfrey are killed by Lord Karstark after Jaime Lannister is released. Catelyn Stark's decision costs Robb 2,000 men. In the TV show, only Willem and Martin Lannister are mentioned, to simplify the number of the phrase, and they are both murdered by Karstark. This is a riff on the Petyr Baelish quote, "Men of honor will do things for their children that they would never consider doing for themselves." This comes from A Feast of Crows, and it refers to Baelish bribing Nestor Royce to stay in power. The Vale Lords claim to be honorable, but a reasonable person could ask how much they knew /suspected of Baelish's manipulations. In the books, Mage Mormont does this. After the Battle of Oxcross, she captures thousands of cattle to be driven back to the Riverlands. But here's the question, how is that possible if the North never took the Golden Tooth? I am not sure if I missed something or whether GRM just said, logistics, food, who cares? Not relevant to the story. Believe it or not, there is a good read, The White Company by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. One of the three main characters is an archer who recruits for the White Company, English mercenaries in France. He literally steals a bed as plunder, and brings it back to England. So Black Walder taking a bed as loot isn't crazy. I am not sure if the book was historically accurate or distorted by Victorian ideas, maybe a bit of both. John points out that knights are hard to control in battle. This is validated by a number of medieval battles where knights are easily provoked. This prevents mixed-use tactics, and was a real problem. Any generals who could coerce forward/coordinate his men, usually the knights were the biggest issue, was a step ahead of other commanders for those times. Fear cuts deeper than swords. This of course belongs to Arya. It is a great quote, and appropriate to John's plot. Foxglove is an actual and naturally occurring poison which I read about years ago in an Agatha Christie story. A murderer replaced heart medication with a batch of foxglove. I have my doubts it would be this lethal or undetectable, but this is fiction after all. In the books, Sir Stephen died 3 days after the Battle of Oxcross, after taking a slight wound in the battle. Robb believes that he might have been able to make amends with Stephen over the whole Jane Westerling affair, but not Ryman and Black Walder. Black Walder is not mentioned at Oxcross, but he is definitely present by the time Robb makes it to the crag. Willow bark contains the chemical salicin, which is very similar to aspirin. It was used commonly in the time of Hippocrates as a pain reliever. Some people believe that Beethoven suffered kidney damage leading to death from too much salicin. John also uses a tourniquet. Despite some articles online dating tourniquet usage to 1674, the Romans used tourniquets. If you Google ancient Roman tourniquet, you will see that exact leather and brass contraption. The Romans invented it by 200 BC. There is evidence that the black kitten, Balerion, grows to become the mangy black tom that Arya catches in the first book. And the quote that Rhaenys should have had a dragon, and not a kitten, comes from Lord Varys in the book. The description of the shield wall comes from a Viking battle. Imagine 3 layers of spearmen. That said, my guess is that this only works in small groups. In battle, the shield wall is probably 2 layers, although I plan to do research on this before Chap 21. Night work is not night's work. This is a quote from Barbary Dustin in A Dance with Dragons. Would John let the prisoners die? Or would he have backed away with children at the brink of death? I will leave that up to the imagination. Or ask yourself this, what would Bloodraven do? Chapter 19, Brothers and Brothers. Chapter text. Brothers and Brothers. If he never ate another fruit tart in his life, Rob would be happy. The Reach was famed for the fertile land that yielded a lush and colorful bounty, red and white grapes, fire plums, peaches, melons, apricots, apples, lemons, oranges, and half a dozen different berries. Lord Caswell's servants rushed here and there with trays of freshly baked pastries with all of these fruits and more. There were golden cakes shaped like roses, swans made of cream resting on beds of tart pomegranate seeds, and spiced honey biscuits dusted with cinnamon and sugar. Where is the cheese plate? Lady Olena's sharp voice froze the brown-haired servant boy ladling cold fruit soup into Mace Tyrell's silver cup. The cheese will be served after the cakes. The boy stammered. The Tyrell matriarch raised her eyebrows, and the frightened boy rushed off, leaving Mace with a half-filled cup. Quite right, a knight simpered. Dessert without cheese is like a beauty with only one eye. Lady Olenna was about to unload on the stout man, but fortunately for the table, a wheel of buttery cheese arrived, pale white on the outside with a yellow wedge cut out. Margaery Tyrell reached out her dainty white hands, and pierced the wedge with a strange tool, two silver prongs coming from the ivory haft, while her right hand cut down with a wide-bladed steel knife with 4 circular holes in the blade. "Are you staring at my granddaughter's hands?" Olenna said. The eyes at the high table swiveled to Rob, and he could see smirks on both Willers and Gullen. Lady Catelyn was mortified, but Mace was too busy, still focused on the missing soup. Margaery blushed prettily. "No, my lady. I have never seen anything like that before." Rob pointed to the fancy tools, now resting next to the cheese on a porcelain plate. "The cheese. Surely you must have cheese even in the northern wastelands." Olenna japed. "Grandmother, he means the cheese fork," Margaery said. "Do you not have forks in the north? I knew it was cold and harsh up where the Starks live, but I did not realize there was no cutlery," Olenna said. Rob bit back a retort. "We have forks, and knives and spoons. But we don't have so many." There were 3 forks to the left of the plate and 2 knives and a spoon to the right. Nestled between the water and the wine goblet was a fancier inlaid spoon and fork, and there was a second plate to hold a napkin on the left. All the forks, knives and spoons were different sizes and designs. It was all quite confusing. "I see." The Queen of Thorns softened a bit. "It is only at the high table. At the other tables, they only have one set, and further down the hall, men eat with only a knife and their hands. The king must inspire the people with his might and grandeur. If you wish to be a king, men must believe that you are the king." Renly looked every inch a Baratheon king. He was a powerful man, taller than Rob, with broad shoulders, thick coal-black hair, and a handsome bearded face. He dressed lavishly, a dark green and gold velvet doublet and a half-cape made of cloth of gold fastened with an emerald brooch. The cloak alone cost more than many a suit of plate armor. He wore a jeweled crown adorned with golden antlers. Yet, Rob doubted that Aegon the Conqueror cared at all about forks or plates. Robert Baratheon had loved eating and drinking, but he had won the throne with a spiked iron warhammer, not feasts. It had been 2 full days since the Raven from Storm's End had come. Rob knew that there had been some preparations, wagons packed, and horses readied for the march, but the men of the Reach and the Stormlands bickered over who would ride and in what order. In every meal, lords had trudged from the lower tables to plead their case before Mace Tyrell and his children, while other members of the small council, Tarly, Fossoe and Rowan, gritted their teeth. Rob had been given the great honor of sitting next to Queen Margaery on the raised platform of the high table. His lady mother sat on the other side in between Jon Fossoe and Mathis Rowan. The 6 members of Rob's honor guard were spread out in the great hall, divided by their status, with Patrek Malister, as heir to Seaguard, with the best seat, and Oliver Free, as the 18th of Lord Walder's sons, the worst. Oliver was forced to eat with the lowest squires and pages, sitting at a bench at the very far end of the hall with hunting dogs and tomcats. Rob grimaced as he thought about the meals at Winterfell. Before he departed for the citadel, his brother had been banished to the back benches on feast days. Lady Caitlin refused to let John sit with his siblings, and his father never said a single word. Rob loved his parents dearly, but they had treated his half-brother poorly. He could see that now, as he looked over the tables and tables of nobles and knights. In the Reach, the highborn scrambled to curry favor with their liege lords. John had never done any of that, and never complained about Lady Stark's disdain. My brother is like Ghost, a dire wolf, and yet apart from the pack. John deserved a better fate. The blunted sword slammed against the steel shield and Rob was forced to give ground to the powerful blows. Sir Garland was a skilled fighter who used height and reach exceptionally well. Rob had never met Barristan the Bold, but as a combination of speed and strength, Garland was unmatched, except perhaps by the Kingslayer. Rob enjoyed his spars with the Tyrell Knight. He could only score 5 or 6 touches before Garland had reached 10, but there was no shame in losing. Better to take bruises in the courtyard and learn, than to defeat overmatched enemies. Rob staggered backwards and his shield arm dropped, as he feigned exhaustion. When Garland began an overhand strike, Rob rushed forward, defending with the blade and punching the shield squarely into the breastplate. The steel edge clipped Garland's chin, and the blade jabbed into the right shoulder of the stunned knight. In a real battle, Rob was not certain he could pierce the heavy steel pauldron, but in this spar, he had won the point. Well struck, Lord Stark. Garland wiped the sweat from his brow. You are still ahead, sir. 8-4. Rob said. Garland laughed. He had an easy charm compared to the serious Willers and the prickly Lauras. Over the last 2 days, Rob observed carefully the men from the Reach. They were brave men, skilled at the joust and the melee, armed with pikes, spears and words. The lines of horses seemed endless, palfreys ridden by knights, high-spirited destriers bred for war, and plough horses driven by teamsters to pull wagons and siege engines. The largest banner was the crowned black stag on a field of gold, but the golden rose of Highgarden outshone every other sigil. A dozen fine tents with Tyrell colours surrounded Renly's green silk pavilion. The Reachmen easily outnumbered the Stormlanders. Bitterbridge was on the Mandea River, so many of the great houses of the Reach, Tyrell, Ashford, Merryweather and Fossoway, could easily travel on the Rose Road. Rob was surprised that besides the green sea turtle of Lord Estermont, the most prominent banners supporting Renly were sworn houses to Highgarden. Further, there were many unknown shields, small lords, or hedge knights who rushed to pledge their fealty to the new king. Renly had secured a great army through marriage and pomp, but a host so quickly gathered could also scatter to the winds. Rob picked up his sword to continue when an excitable Oliver Free burst into the yard, startling several other men at arms. Lord Stark. A raven has come for you. Oliver said. Then give it to me. Rob placed his shield down and reached out his hand. My lord. The Queen of Thorns, Earl, Lady Olenna, has taken it. She sent her guardsmen to inform us. Twin giants they were, taller than the great Jon, his squire said. Rob arched his eyebrows and Garland gave a sheepish look. Very well. Lead me to her. He said to his anxious squire. Rob walked silently to the castle, ignoring the curious eyes of Tyrell retainers. Lady Olenna and her cronies had taken over the cloister garth near the September. It was puny compared to the paths and trails of Highgarden, but the green court held a kitchen garden, a terrace for herbs, and wooden trellises for fruit trees. The sweet smell of rosemary, peppermint, and fenugreek mixed with the earthy scents of leeks, cabbages and parsnips. Rob passed Olenna's formidable guards, a Reich and a jester, singing the Bear and the Maiden Fair, while he bounced a ball off his fat buttocks to the amusement of Margaery and her ladies. Rob cleared his throat loudly, attracting the attention of Olenna Tyrell. Margaery stopped laughing and turned her big brown eyes to him. Her shy sweet smile was almost convincing. Garland greeted his wife, the dainty and always pleasantly Onette Fossoway. The young girls hushed, but an older dark-haired woman with exotic Issozi features gazed boldly at Rob. Lord Stark. Why do you glower? Is this a northern custom? Olenna asked. My lady, you know the reason. You have a raven for me. Rob said. Ah yes, the raven. The old woman replied. Tell them what you saw, Maester. An old man with white hair and a stooped back came over, holding a squawking raven in an iron cage. There were streaks of reddish-brown on the bird's black feathers. Lady Tyrell, The raven arrived this morning with blood on its claws, the Maester squeaked. So? Perhaps it attacked another bird or defended itself. Rob said. No, my lord. The blood was from the letter. And it must have been fresh to drip like so on claws and feathers. The old man said to the gasps of many ladies. A message written in blood is not the norm. Such a letter attracts curiosity. Olenna said, pointing to the piece of parchment, sealed with a wax dire wolf. The Reach would be curious of any message from Riverrun, whether it was written in ink or blood. Rob took the note, broke the seal, and read it silently. He kept his face still as the tension grew in the room. Finally, before the Queen of Thorn could snap, he acceded to their interest. It is from my brother, John. He has won a battle and cracked the tooth. A tooth? Did he lose it in fighting? The sultry dark-haired woman asked in a breathy voice. The golden tooth. John has taken the seat of House Lefford and captured many prisoners. Rob left the terse note on the table for Lady Olenna and Margaery to read. How did he take the tooth? Sir Garland asked. That is a hard strong keep and commands the hill road. He could not have besieged the castle in a few days. I do not know, sir. The letter is short. Rob shrugged. Will you need paper and a quill to write back to your brother? Margaery asked. Why should I? He is busy at war, while I just wait. Rob said pointedly. He walked out to find his men, leaving the Tyrells to their plots and schemes. The next morning, Renly Baratheon was ready to ride. After a sumptuous breakfast, the king came out in his suit of forest green plate mail, chased with gold fluting, polished to a mirror shine. Renly wore a saw-lit helm crowned with a great rack of golden antlers whose tips added an extra foot and a half to the top. Rob was no maester, but even he knew that in battle, the force of a blow to the useless antlers would be transmitted to the head. Such a shock from a mace or a hammer could easily be fatal. Flanked by his knights in rainbow cloaks, Renly waved to the masses, the visor opened so the crowd could see his easy smile. Behind Renly, followed the chivalry of the Reach and the Stormlands. Loras Tyrell, as Lord Commander, rode first, but the 6 other Rainbow Guards formed a semicircle with their multicolored silk cloaks billowing in the wind. Rob was in the next group, next to Randil Tarly and John Fossoe. The genial Fossoe Knights of Cider Hall and New Barrel were good company, but the bristly Lord of Hornhill was not. His 2 sons attended him, one pale and very stout and the other lean and robust. There were other great lords with their heirs and most trusted retainers, Estermont and Rowan, Caron and Hightower, Oakert, Selmy, Crane, and Tyrell cousins and uncles. Mace and Garland though remained at Bitterbridge. Rob grimaced. There were far too many knights, and not enough other troops, light cavalry to skirmish, foot soldiers with pikes, archers and crossbowmen. He guessed that like Roose Bolton and Ricard Carstark, the Tyrell men would ride with the infantry and the supply wagons. At the Twins, Rob had split his troops deliberately to surprise the Kingslayer and break the siege with his cavalry. But Stannis Baratheon would certainly not be surprised, given the terms for the parley. Rob hoped that they were not walking into an ambush. Another round of cheers came from the crowd. Rob craned his neck and saw the elegant green wheelhouse, pulled by 6 heavy coursers and decorated with golden flowers. The Rose of Highgarden waved to the crowd and the wizened Queen of Thorns joined her. At least, it was not the obscenely gigantic wheelhouse that Cersei and the royal children rode. That double-decked monstrosity pulled by 40 horses was too wide to pass through the Winterfell gates. A gallant Renly rode back and planted a light kiss on his wife's cheek. Then Tyrell guards helped Margaery and Lady Olenna into the carriage and closed the door. Rob tied the saddlebags, full of bread, hard cheese, dried fruit and meat, to the pommel of his white stallion. He drank deeply and handed the empty waterskin to Oliver to refill. Grey Wind had feasted on deer last night and the dire wolf was eager to run free. Rob heartily agreed. He had stayed at Bitterbridge for 3 long nights and was more than happy to leave. The sooner they finished with Stannis, the sooner he could return to Riverrun. The sun was still high in the sky, although on the descent. They rode south and would reach the clear waters of the Blueburn in time for dinner, before following the river an hour more to the east. The Blueburn River flowed from Longtable in the Reach to the western parts of the Stormlands. They would meet Stannis at the river's end, north of Summerhall. Rob enjoyed the lush green fields on horseback with grey wind at his side. This was the Reach proper, a well-populated area watered by the immense Mandea and its two daughters, the Blueburn and the Cockerleswent. He rode alone, with Lady Caitlin speaking to nobles from the Reach, and his guards exchanged tales of their feats in battle with admiring squires. He was surprised when two palfreys approached, with the Rose of Highgarden in the lead. "Talisa, I would speak to Lord Rob. If you could return to my grandmother," Margaery said. The dark-haired healer nodded and turned her horse back. Rob was surprised by Lady Maegai's presence on this excursion. Talisa was born in Volantis. Stannis Baratheon has a red priestess of Arla, a witch and a shadow binder. In Volantis, they worship Arla. They say the temple of the Lord of Light in the city is several times larger than the September of Baelor. Margaery explained. "And you think she can help us against this woman?" Rob asked. Margaery shrugged. "It can't hurt. We know nothing about this red god. This woman has burnt statues of the Seven on Dragonstone, and claims to have seen visions in the flames for Stannis. Is it mummery or is there something more? I had hoped Lady Talisa might tell us." "That is thoughtful, Your Grace. It is something my brother Jon would do," Rob said. "Lord Stark, tell me, what more do you know of the Golden Tooth?" Margaery asked, batting her lovely eyes. Rob snorted at her brazen effort. In her own way, Margaery was as brassy as Lady Olenna. Last night, news of the capture of the Golden Tooth spread. Renly's bannermen tried to ask Caitlin and Honor Guard questions half a dozen ways, but they could give no greater insights. Randil Tarlis' face had turned an angry red when his mother professed to know nothing of the war efforts. "You have seen everything I have," he replied before relenting. "Your Grace, Jon sent that one raven. I can only guess at how he cracked the tooth. Surely you know more. You gave your brother command of the army. He must be following your orders," Margaery insisted. Rob shook his head. "I did not give Jon orders. We discussed possibilities, targets, and potential outcomes. How far should the troops march into the Westerlands, what castles to attack? Jon's counsel does not always agree with mine, and on the field, he is his own man. He must be, when things change in battle, so must the general's orders." "You trust your half-brother much, my lord," Margaery said. "He is my blood. I am Lord of Winterfell, Your Grace. I trust Jon to lead my men. And as for how he took the tooth, my guess would be with a clever trick. Attacking with speed and surprise is the best way to victory," Rob said. Margaery cocked her head to the side. "You must think us silly and slow. Renly took 3 days to ride for the Stormlands. And my father, Mace, is known more for feasts, not speed. My grandmother has heard what Lady Caitlin said, that we are the knights of the summer and winter is coming. Tell me, my lord, do you think Renly's army will wither away?" Rob thought his mother should not say such things to the lords of the Reach. "I have sparred with several of your men, your brother Garlan, but also the Fossoes, Bryce Caron, Robar Royce, and the Purple Knight. They were skilled with the sword, but good fighters do not always make a good army." Margaery reacted with surprise. "What do you mean? Men train for years to fight with lance and sword. And that may win jousts and melees. But a battle is not won by single combat. A good army has discipline, speed, supplies, and a mix of troops. In songs, the knights charge gallantly ahead to victory. The Kingslayer did that at the Whispering Wood, and we slaughtered his men. No army wins with one troop type alone, unless they face idiots," Rob said. "But Renly only took the knights. The archers and infantry will take a week to follow," Lady Margaery stammered. "In good weather, and on the open field, Renly's knights would win. But if you gave my brother a week to prepare with cavalry, archers and pikes, Jon would bleed you badly," Rob said. "We will have reinforcements. Even with the knights alone, we outnumber Stannis. And Garlan will bring 25,000 more men. Our forces will overwhelm them," she said. And I do not understand that. Stannis is said to be a good battle commander. My father says that he won the war against the Greyjoys, defeating the Iron Fleet. The Ironborn are not easy to beat at sea. Why should Stannis offer battle if he had no hope of victory? He is no dreamer, boasting of victories. He has been blooded in war, unlike your men. Robb said. Renly says that our swords and lances are so great that with a single charge, he will break the enemy host. Margaery said. She sounded more hopeful than certain. Anyone can boast. And all armies can lose. Bad terrain. Poor weather. Surprise attack. Your bannermen see war as a tourney to win glory. That is why they are summer knights. War is not a song. Stannis will not an easy opponent. Robb said. Do you know what he may do? Margaery asked, worried. I do not. I have never met Stannis, nor stepped foot on the Stormlands. I do not know what forces he commands. But I know this, an army of sheep led by a stag is better than an army of stags led by a sheep. Stannis is not a sheep. He will fight to the end. In 2 days, they reached the terminus of the Blue Burn. With the march guided by Lord Tully, Renly had only stopped at one castle, Grassfield Keep. And that had only been a quick lunch without singers, jugglers or jesters. Hedge knights, sellswords, and camp followers swelled their ranks along the way, but that did not slow down the pace. Even the wheelhouse kept up, with fresh horses provided by House Meadows of Grassy Vale. Robb had not seen Renly for much of the trip. The king spent much of his time in the wheelhouse or with Loras Tyrell. He had encountered Margaery and Talisa on their palfreys, escorted by Sir Aemon Huey or Sir Guyard Morrigan of the Rainbow Guard, and spoken to the Fosso men and Mathis Rowan. Their company was preferable to the dour and suspicious Tully. He was a hard taskmaster and made everyone uncomfortable, including both of his sons. Even Lady Olenna shied from provoking the Lord of Horn Hill. That night, they camped on a windswept plain, with yellow grass as far as the eye could see. Renly had summoned the bannerman to his green and gold pavilion and had requested the presence of House Stark as well. Lady Catelyn was concerned about the meeting. Robb, will you fight in the battle? She asked, worried. His guards had stepped outside to give them privacy. Mother, tomorrow will be a parley. If the stags have sense, there won't be fighting. Robb said. The Baratheons are known for their temper. And Renly may want you to fight for him. Kings do not forget such things. Catelyn said. Robb strapped the Valyrian steel dagger to his belt. He expected no trouble but better to be prepared. Any man can crown himself. Renly is not king yet, and I have not bent the knee. If we are attacked, we will fight back. But for now, the North will only observe. Perhaps, we shouldn't be here, caught in the middle between two armies. Catelyn said. Robb shook his head. We must know what the Baratheons plan. If Renly triumphs, and he gives us men, we can crush Tywine in the Riverlands. If the Baratheons unite, then they will hold the Iron Throne, and Joffrey will lose his head. And if Stannis wins, I would take the measure of the man. We can bend the knee if Stannis destroys the Lannisters. Robb said. You are consumed by revenge. Wars need not be fought until the last drop of blood. I have lost my lord husband. I do not want to bury a son, she cried. Mother, this is not for my revenge. I fight for our family. The throne beheaded the Lord of Winterfell. My ancestors have marched to war for much less. The kings of winter would only kneel to a dragon, not a lion or a stag. Robb said. Those times are past. Bend to knee to save your life, if you must. If not for yourself, then think of Bran and Rickon, so they grow up with a brother. Catelyn said. I do not want to die. But if death comes, let me die for House Stark. Father would do the same. And if I die, Jon will avenge me. He will not rest until my killers are dead. Robb said. But your brothers and sisters? What about them? Catelyn said. Jon will protect them. Who will fight for House Stark? Even if Bran could still walk, he is a boy of 9. Sansa is trapped in King's Landing. Arya is lost. And Rickon has 4 name days. If I die, the Lannisters will try to kill my brothers and use my sisters to control Winterfell. You know that, Mother. Jon would defend them. He would be their best hope. With those last words, Robb left his tent, with Asoma Catelyn and his men trailing behind. The green pavilion was larger, far more spacious than the command tent that Rob had used on the march down from Winterfell. There were comforts that would have looked at home in a castle boudoir, a feather mattress with satin pillows, a wood and copper tub, and bottles of Arbor and Dornish wine with a crystal glass decanter and a complete set of silver cups. Squires had set out a silver bowl of ripe peaches, plums and pears. Rob was more drawn to the yew longbow set next to the king's armor. A full quiver of arrows rested on a nearby hook, a few broad arrowheads for hunting but most with short bodkin points, better to punch holes through mail armor. The Marcher Lords of the Stormlands were justly famous for the skill of their bowmen, sharpened by centuries of beating back Dornish invaders. Many houses clustered around the Red Mountains, that separated Dorne, the Reach, and the Stormlands. The Tarlis, the Dondarrions, and the Danes pledged loyalty to different leagues, but they were all strong allies in war. Rob wondered if Renly had any skill with the bow. Our scouts have sent a message back from Storm's End. Stannis has a force of 5,000, and only a few bannermen, House Celtigar, Sunglass, Barrowman, and Valerian. He has less than 500 horse, and many of those free riders in boiled leather. They are not well supplied, but their ships have blockaded Shipbreaker Bay. Mathis Rowan reported. Our armored lances will sweep away their cavalry with our first charge. Let me lead the knights for you, your grace. I will show them the fate of traitors. Loras declared. The commander of the Rainbow Guard was too eager to see the slight hesitation on Renly's face. We met here to parley. Stannis is your brother. Should you not speak to him first before considering battle? Rob said. Randil Tarly sneered. We have an army. He has an army. We should crush Stannis now when he is weak. Are you afraid of battle, Stark? I have won plenty of battles, Tarly. Rob turned again to Renly. Your Grace, do you wish to be the king of the Highgarden or to rule over the 7 kingdoms? Renly looked surprised. The second, of course. Then the day will come when House Celtigar, Valerian, and men near Dragonstone will pledge their banners to you and Queen Margaery. Why fight now, if there is no need? I am no Maester, but the Targaryen kings were strongest when there was a Targaryen hand. The founder of House Baratheon was the first hand of the king for his half-brother Aegon the Conqueror. Why not have a Baratheon hand for a Baratheon king? Rob asked. But my father Mace was promised the position of hand. Loras sputtered. Quiet, Loras. Let Lord Stark speak and explain his thinking. Olenna said. There are many positions that can be awarded to the Tyrells and their bannermen. The Small Council, the City Watch, the Kingsguard. Offer to appoint Stannis Hand of the King. Your brother has sat on the Small Council for many years. He knows the power of the hand. Rob said. That will not satisfy Stannis. He wants the throne for himself and his heirs. Rowan said. He has only a daughter of 10. Shireen cannot inherit. If he has no more children, then you would be the heir to the throne anyway. And if he should have another son, you can promise a betrothal with your children. You can bind your families together in marriage. If you made peace, House Baratheon would rule for centuries, like the Targaryens. Rob argued. Renly smiled sadly. You have never met my brother, Lord Stark. He is hard and stubborn, and does not forgive slights. He still believes he was cheated out of Storm's End. Stannis was cheated, Rob thought. The older brother should have inherited their family home. Then give him Storm's End. No man is as accursed as a kinslayer. You may not wield the sword that kills him, but it would be your men following your orders. He is your brother. What would the gods say if he died at your hand? I will treat with him. But my brothers and I have never been close. Robert was too busy whoring and Stannis grinding his teeth. But if this does not work, we will battle. Renly said. They rode to an unnamed field, the grass yellow and orange from summer's end. There was a high ridge over the plain, that could be reached only by a stony path. Rob wore armor, sword and dagger but no helmet. His shield was strapped to the back of his white courser and Grey Wind cantered at his side. Sir Loras and Queen Margaery rode at the sides of Renly while Rob formed the third line, Lady Catelyn, Lords Tully, Rowan and Fossoe. The Rainbow Guard followed closely behind with Lady Talisa. In the distance, Rob could see them approaching. Stannis rode in front with two figures at his sides, a pale woman with the hair of burnished copper all dressed in red, and a man with a weathered face in plain brown and grey. Heavily armored men carried the banner of a black stag enclosed in a red heart wreathed in orange flames. Robb took a closer look at Stannis. He was a large man, tall, broad-shouldered with dark blue eyes. His black hair was thin, and he had a close-cropped beard on his square jaw. There was a harshness about him that betrayed a lack of mercy in thin pale lips and hollow cheeks. This was not a man who enjoyed mummers or jugglers. Unlike Renly, who wore polished green plate mail and the crown of golden antlers, Stannis dressed plainly in a grey wool tunic over boiled leather, black breeches, and a plain black belt with sword and dagger. He had no need of a crown to appear a king. There was no love lost between the two brothers. After brief greetings, the two brothers introduced their companions. Stannis snorted at the Tyrells, and was distinctly unimpressed with Renly's marriage. In return, Renly japed about the reasons behind Stannis's newfound religion and the buxom Red Priestess. Melisandre declared that Stannis was as a High reborn, amidst salt and smoke, under a bleeding star. She did not respond to Renly's joke about hams. Stannis turned to Robb. "I am surprised to see you here, Lord Stark. Your father supported my claim. His integrity cost him his head when he declared Joffrey illegitimate. Did you know that the royal children were bastards?" Robb asked. "I suspected that, along with Jon Arryn. Stannis said. "Then why did you not tell your brothers? Had you informed Robert, Cersei Lannister and her brother would have lost their heads. And Joffrey would be exiled." Robb said. "He would not have believed me." Stannis said. "He would have believed you and Jon Arryn. Or if you had told my father directly, he would have believed you and Ned Stark. Instead, you disappeared to Dragonstone. Jon Arryn has been dead a full year. The kingdoms burn because you stayed silent." Robb said. "What is done is done. I am the rightful king now. The Iron Throne is mine by right. All those who deny that, are rebels and usurpers." Stannis said bluntly. "Everyone denies you. Dorne, the Reach, the Westerlands, and the North. Who proclaims you king? The Lord of Light. He has no swords or spears. You have only a few thousand men. I have the might of the Reach and the Stormlands. Acknowledge me as the heir and I will make you my hand." Renly said. "You should not jest about Arla. He will save the world from darkness through his chosen one." Melisandre said. "I am the older. It is my duty to rule. What have you done to deserve the Iron Throne? Sit in meetings of the small council and make japes. Ride on a horse at tourneys and be beaten by better men. These qualify you to be a jester or a hedge knight, not a king." Stannis said. Before Renly could utter an ugly retort, Robb spoke up. "Lord Baratheon, if you became Hand, you would rule. Your brother, Robert, and the Mad King may have worn crowns, but it was Jon Arryn and Tywin Lannister who ruled. The realms were prosperous and at peace then. Why not serve as your brother's hand? You would command armies, dispense justice, and draft laws. The Seven Kingdoms need a strong hand. Why could it not be you?" Stannis ground his teeth. "It is my right. It belongs to my family. Your family is Baratheon. And there would be a Baratheon king. Joffrey claims to be half stag, but he is all lion. If you fight your brother, the Lannisters may win. Or even the Dornish. If you join together, House Baratheon will be victorious. The North will bend the knee when my lord father receives justice." Robb said. "King Stannis will defeat his enemies. The Lord of Light favors him." Melisandre said fervently. "And what of Shireen?" Stannis said. "Your brother can promise a marriage to a great lord. And if you should have a son in the future, and Queen Margaery has a daughter, perhaps they can wed." Robb said. Stannis scowled as he looked at his brother and Margaery. Robb could not tell whether he was merely scornful or seriously considering the offer. Stannis was a proud and hard man, but the hand of the king was the second most powerful man in the Seven Kingdoms. Robb doubted that Renly, who was so fond of mummers and banquets, would be an attentive king. Stannis had attended the small council since the rebellion. For a moment, there appeared to be a chance, however small, that stubborn Stannis might be swayed. Then Renly opened his mouth. Renly's hand slid inside his cloak, and Stannis immediately reached for his sword. Smiling, Renly offered a golden peach in his right hand. "Would you like one, brother? You've never tasted anything so sweet." He took a large bite, and juice ran down the corner of his mouth. "I did not come here to eat." Stannis fumed. Robb did not understand what was happening. Neither did his lady mother, the Tyrells, or Renly's great lords. They had been negotiating before Renly took out the piece of fruit. A man should never refuse to taste a peach. He may never get the chance again. Life is short, Stannis. And as the Starks say, winter is coming. Renly said, throwing away the fruit. Robb noticed that most of the peach had been wasted. "Are you threatening me?" Stannis demanded. "I have fought battles before you could even hold a sword." His rage was plain to see. "Ah yes, I remember. The siege at Storm's End. Where we had to eat horses, dogs, cats and rats. You performed so well during that battle." Renly japed. There was something ugly there, unsaid but full of tension. Stannis and Renly Baratheon had suffered for an entire year at Storm's End, besieged by the Tyrells who feasted outside the castle. Had Mace Tyrell went to the Riverlands and reinforced Rhaegar, Robert would have lost the war. Instead, the small garrison at Storm's End suffered greatly for Robert's glory, and Stannis commanded that garrison. Robb realized that Stannis had only been his age, 16 name days, during the siege, while Renly was little older than Rickon. He wondered what scars that battle inflicted on both Baratheon brothers. "Enough!" Stannis stormed. "This mummery has gone too far. I am the rightful heir to the Iron Throne. For the sake of our mother who bore us, I will give you one night to consider. Bend the knee, and you will keep Storm's End and a place in my council. Else I will destroy you when the sun rises tomorrow." He turned his horse and rode off. The man in brown and grey said nothing. But the Red Priestess looked to Renly and smiled. "The night is dark and full of terrors. Look to your sins, Lord Renly." Stannis and his followers left, leaving them with that cryptic comment. "Prepare to fight, my lords," Renly said, smiling. The young king jested with his Rainbow Guard, and Sir Loras once again asked to lead the charge. "What do you think of the Red Woman?" Margaery asked Talisa. The healer rode next to them, as the order of the march broke down. "Your Grace, she frightens me. She wore a ruby on the red gold choker at the neck. Only shadowbinders wear such a thing, and they use it to conjure evil magics," Talisa said. "Magics? Perhaps she will teach Stannis how to laugh or perform in bed." Renly japed. "My lady, what is a shadowbinder?" Robb asked. "I do not know, sir, but shadowbinders are said to cast the most sinister spells, even darker than the warlocks of Karth. With dark sorcery, they can bind shadows to do their will. There is a ruined city in Essos called Stygia, full of the walking dead. The shadowbinders go there to consort with demons or worse," Talisa said. "What a bunch of bollocks. You can listen to these prophecies and tales of witchcraft, but the swords of the Reach will destroy Stannis. Her magic is a sham," Tarly ranted. Lord Tarly was decidedly unpleasant, and Margaery's face showed great annoyance, before she hid behind her bland and charming mask. She was a skilled mummer, Robb thought. His horse skittered, avoiding something in the grass. Robb looked down at a sharp arrow point. It was old and rusted, but the point was still sharp. Curious, Robb dismounted and looked around. There were many arrowheads here, buried under the tall grass. "Robb, what is the matter?" Lady Catelyn said. 2 knights of the Rainbow Guard paused, wondering if there was any danger. "I found arrows, a great deal of them. There is something odd here." Robb looked at the high ridge, and suddenly he understood. "I know this place." "But Lord Stark, you said you have never been to the Stormlands," a puzzled Margaery said. By now, Renly and the other lords had stopped their horses. "My brother, Jon Snow, has told me of this place." Robb's hands opened out. "We will not be the first army to charge over this field. 100 years ago, this grass turned blood red with the deaths of 10,000 men. This is Redgrass Field, where Demon Blackfyr fought the combined Targaryen forces. He would have won but for that." Rob pointed upwards to the stony high ground far above them. That is the Weeping Ridge. The black dragon was winning until Bloodraven and the raven's teeth reached the top. From there, they rained volleys of arrows down, killing demons' sons, and the black dragon himself. Your brother told you of this? Asked a surprised Renly. Jon and I have spent much time discussing war. He has a good head for battle. Stannis chose the meeting ground. He must be planning for his men to take the ridge, so they can shoot your knights when they charge. You should post archers there, Robb said. Lord Rowan looked sourly at Tully. We have no archers, Lord Stark, only knights. Rowan said. What does that matter? Our armor is the highest quality the Reach has to offer. Arrows cannot penetrate plate mail. Loras boasted. The Black Dragon wore the best steel, as did his sons Aegon and Aemon. Bloodraven killed all three. A volley of arrows is different from a single archer. And the ridge is high up. The arrows will come down with great speed, enough to find weaknesses in your armor or helmet. The arrows could strike your horses, and then your charge would fail. Robb said. Jon Fossoway shed his genial manner and took charge. This was clever of Stannis. I will send my knights to secure the ridge. They may not have bows, but they can prevent anyone else from shooting. And if the battle goes on for days, archers from the Reach will join us. Robb nodded. The Weeping Ridge required a long hard climb over stony mountainous ground. It was difficult to reach and not a natural place to put troops. He wondered what other tricks Stannis had in store. That night, Renly asked to speak with Robb alone. Oliver Free and Lucas Blackwood stood outside, chatting with Brian, Imon Huey and Red Robar Royce. Renly had washed and bathed just recently. A silver goblet was balanced precariously on the edge of the copper and wood tub, and the scent of lavender and dried herbs filled the air. The would-be king wore a dark green velvet doublet with golden stags, and sat in a high-slung leather camp chair. He offered the other to Robb. Lord Stark, I want to thank you for your insights this morning. Fossoway and Estermont men have secured the Weeping Ridge. Any archers in Stannis's forces will not gain the high ground. I am indebted to you. I would not want my knights to be ambushed from above. Renly said. There were no hints of smiles or laughter in his voice. I am glad, Your Grace. But are you certain you must fight your brother? Robb asked. Renly put down the glass decanter and sat back in the chair. He looked older in the light of the candles that dripped wax on the black feathered quill. I loved Stannis once, a long time ago. But the older I became, the more his flaws were clear. When the war was over, Robert made me Lord of Storm's End. I was a boy of 7, but even then, I could feel Stannis's disdain. He believed he deserved our family home. Perhaps so, but why be angry at me? I had no part in the decision. He has never forgiven me for that. When I smile, Stannis thinks I mock him. When I joke, I am a fool. When I enjoy living, I am a frivolous twit. Since I took his castle, I could do nothing right in his eyes. Renly said. But you did take his castle, Robb thought. Storm's End belonged to Stannis as the heir to House Baratheon. The Targaryen kings gave Dragonstone as a seat for the crown prince, but Stannis would never have inherited the throne. Cersei and Tywin Lannister would not have allowed that. I am sorry for your troubles. But kings have disliked their hands before. Renly turned keen shrewd eyes on Robb. Stannis would make a terrible hand. Oh yes, he is clever and tough, but a hand needs allies. A hand needs to win friends and influence people. Stannis will tell you to do something because it is your duty. Fat lot of good that will do with Tywin Lannister or even the Tyrells. I am sorry that it has come to this. I would never wish to face my brother in battle. You are Starks. Wolves band together like packs. It is not the same with the Baratheons. Stags are solitary beasts who rut and fight. Robert was much like that. He rutted in all 7 kingdoms. He called it making the 8, Renly said with a slight grimace before turning his full attention to Robb. Lord Stark, will you fight with me in this battle? I have only 6 men. I doubt that would make a difference in the battle. Robb said dryly. It is not only your sword. You are a good leader of men. Had you not pointed out the high ridge, my knights would have been ambushed. Lord Rowan and Lord Fossoe have not known you for long, but already they admire your military acumen. That is because they dislike Randil Tali, Rob thought. Your Grace, the North has not declared for anyone in the war. We seek justice for my father's death. My lord, who will most likely to grant that to you? There are 3 contenders for the crown. Joffrey the Illborn, and whoever Tywine supports. Stannis, without support from anyone. And myself, with both the Reach and the Stormlands behind me. Stannis consorts with a Red Priestess who burns statues of the 7. The Faith will not accept that. What if she destroys Godswoods for this Lord of Light? Stannis would tear the 7 kingdoms apart. I am best suited for the Iron Throne. I am no drunk like Robert, nor a bitter zealot like Stannis. I would care for small folk and highborn alike. I would be a good friend to the North. Renly said. Rob was about to respond when a sudden gust of wind flung open the door of the tent. He heard grey winds howl, and then saw the shadows on the silk walls move. The candles guttered out, and he felt a strange chill. The shadow was black on the green silk, and it raised a sword. Rob barked a word of warning, and drew his sword out to parry that strange insubstantial and yet deadly blade as it sliced down at Renly's neck. There was no sound when the swords met. Instead, Rob shivered as pain lanced through his arm. Renly had dived to the floor, his face a mask of horror. Grey wind burst through the door, rushing to his master's side. Gods! Rob screamed. The shadow had turned to him, and he could see in the head the features of a Baratheon, large eyes, a heavy brow, a strong jutting chin. But the shadow was not Renly's, but Stannis, with a hollow skull-like face, and a fringe of hair that went from the temples to the chin. Brian, Sir Robar and Sir Aemon charged through the door. The shadow raised both arms, towering over Renly. Again, Rob stepped forward to block the blade. The swords met, and Rob staggered from the blow, dropping to his knees. Shadow Stannis advanced again toward Renly, ready to thrust the nightmare blade down at the would-be king. Rob leaped up, and plunged his steel sword through the umbral form. The face, shrouded in black and red, turned and with a sneer, backhanded Rob into the table and the decanter shattered on the floor, spilling arbor gold on the grass. Grey wind growled and lunged for the shadow. The dire wolf's powerful jaws closed on the shadow's body, but just like the steel sword of his master, there was no effect. The teeth closed without harm to the eldritch creation. For the king, shouted the 3 knights of the Rainbow Guard. Aemon Qi threw himself over Renly's body. Robar brought his 2-handed blade down on the shadow blade in an attempt to disarm. The Shade's weapon was forced down into the ground, short of Renly, but then the ghost of Stannis merely dropped the blade, and it vanished into thin air. The shadow walked forward, smashed Sir Aemon to the side like a fly, and then wrapped 2 large ghostly hands around Renly's throat. Brian grabbed a candle. There are only a few left in the pavilion that had not gutted out. She thrust boldly at the monster, and the wax hissed as it touched the sorcerer's form. The shadow swung about, one huge hand still choking Renly, and ghastly black eyes on Brian and Robar. The right arm of the Shade clenched, and a dark axe appeared, summoned out of the depths of hell. Rob stood up. Lucas Blackwood and Oliver Free were at his side, trying to drag him away from the fiendish threat. Rob resisted, refusing to abandon Renly to a brutal and vile death. The spectral likeness of Stannis, a blasphemy to the old gods and the 7, filled him with loathing. Rob grabbed at the dagger at his belt, his hand on the dragonbone hilt. Nothing was deeper and sharper than Valyrian steel, forged with magic from long ago. Rob rushed forward and plunged the dagger into the shadow's left arm. The ghost of Stannis screamed in pain, dropping an ashen Renly to the ground. The axe, blood red over black, swiped down, hurtling toward Rob's head. He managed to throw himself aside, and the enchanted axe only landed a glancing blow on his right shoulder. He was numb, ice spreading through his arm and chest. Something was very wrong. The room turned dark and cold, colder than any winter storm in the Wolf's Wood. Voices called for him, and a distraught wolf howled. There was shouting but Rob could not hear. Throngs of people, knights, ladies, men-at-arms, lords, surged into the room, babbling and yelling and getting into each other's way. Everything turned blurry and hazy. He tried to speak, or move, or do anything but his legs stumbled and collapsed. A stooped figure and other women stood over him with candles. There were cries of shock as the light revealed a pallid and wan Renly. But Robb knew no more. The Lord of Winterfell succumbed to the cold and dark, and entered a dark dreamless slumber. He woke up, his mouth dry and his eyes blinking, as the light filtered into the tent. He was on some sort of bed, clearly not his simple sleep sack, and he could feel shaggy smoke-grey fur, and the smell of the dire wolf. Grey Wind's head peeked up, and those hard yellow eyes looked at it, before a long and wet tongue licked him in the face. Robb's amused grunt attracted immediate attention. "Oh good, you are finally awake." There was a smile on the long and pretty face of Talisa Magai. She was a full white apron over her simple grey dress and she handled him a cup of cold water. Robb had tasted anything so refreshing. His mind began to reconstruct the events of the last hours, speaking to Renly, the black shadow with the face of Stannis, the bitter cold. Robb sat up abruptly, and groaned when his arm and shoulder throbbed. "Wait, what happened to the battle?" he said. The tent flaps opened, and Patrick Maester rushed in. "Lord Stark, you are awake. Thank the Seven." "I will send someone to tell Lady Catelyn immediately," the man said. "Hold. Sir Patrick, who won the battle between Stannis and Renly?" "Battle, my lord. There was no battle. But the Tyrells have put Oliver free and Sir Lucas to trial. Lady Stark would be at your side, but she is speaking for them," Patrick said. "What?" Robb swung his legs over to the side. His feet felt sluggish and his head throbbed. He stood up shakily, and Patrick rushed to support his injured right side. "Lord Stark, you should not stand. You are still hurt," Talisa said. "Lady Talisa, my men are in danger." "Sir Patrick, bring me there," Robb said. He shuffled slowly out of the tent with the direwolf leading the way. As he walked out, Robin Flint joined the small group. The other guards, Sir Donal and Owen, were at his mother's side. Robb gritted his teeth and walked as quickly as possible, but his legs felt like jelly. Grey Wind snarled, and the soldiers backed away, before pointing and whispering. Patrick and Robin led him to a large clearing. On an elevated platform, 5 figures in plain tunics were forced to kneel, hands bound behind their backs. Even at this distance, Robb could see the bruised faces of Oliver, Lucas, and the 3 Rainbow Guard members. The Tyrells sat on elegant golden heart chairs decorated with roses. Queen Margaery and Lady Olenna flanked a fat Mace Tyrell. Pacing back and forth was an agitated and shouting Loras. Robb forced himself to speed up, ignoring stiff hips and aching legs. Many more people began to realize his presence as Grey Wind nosed forward. On the dais, Margaery saw him first, and then a hush fell over the crowd, when the direwolf burst forth to the shock of both Catelyn Stark and Loras Tyrell. The prisoners raised their heads, and the rest of Robb's guard surrounded their wounded lord, wary of any confrontation. "What in the 7 hells is going on here?" Robb shouted. The eyes of the entire crowd, Tyrell, Fossoe, Tarly, Rowan, and a dozen other great lords were on him. "Lord Stark, you have woken," Sir Garland said with relief. The Tyrell knight stepped forward, and motioned for the 3 free members of the Rainbow Guard to stand down. "Why are my men being tried?" Robb asked. Garland exchanged a look with an embarrassed Loras. Sir Loras said they had failed in protecting their king. "He accused your guardsmen of lying and cowardice," Garland said. "Did you even ask them what happened in the tent?" Robb. "They lied about a shadow attacking Renly with a sword and an axe. And that it strangled Renly with its bare hands," Loras cried. Robb looked at the faces of the prisoners. The fresh bruises made it clear they had been beaten recently. He turned back to the Tyrells with scorn in his voice. "We were attacked by foul magic. A shadow tried to kill Renly. Brian and these 4 men risked their lives. Sir Aemon threw his body in front of the king. Brian and Sir Robar fought bravely after the shadow knocked me down. I am certain my men and the 3 Rainbow Guards told the same story," Robb said. But, Loras said. "What proof do you have of this, Lord Stark?" Mace Tyrell asked pompously. "Be quiet." Lady Olenna's sharp voice cut through the chatter. "Lord Stark, what exactly happened?" "Renly and I were speaking." The door of the tent blew open, and the candles began to go out. The shadow moved along the walls and then drew a sword. I blocked it with my blade, but the blow knocked me back. Then I saw the face. It was Stannis Baratheon, some horrible spectre conjured by that red priestess out of hell. We tried to fight, but it barely noticed our attacks. Nothing could stop the shadow from wrapping its hands around Renly's neck. Finally, I stabbed the shade, and it released him. But the knights failed to defend the king. Loras said. You, sir, are a dolt. Robb hissed. None of our swords did anything. I put 6 inches of steel through the shadow and it had no effect. Grey Wind could not hurt it. Sir Robert disarmed the creature and it summoned a shadow axe. He pointed to the prisoners on the platform. They fought bravely. You dishonor yourself, and not them, by your actions. If it was invulnerable to weapons, how did you defeat the shadow? Olenna asked. Our swords were useless. But Valyrian steel was not. I plunged the Valyrian steel dagger into the creature's left arm. The shadow screamed, dropped Renly and melted away. The axe hit me, and I remember little after that. Robb said. The crowd had gone silent, as they digested the astonishing story. When he finished, the whispers began and Robb heard the words young wolf and bloody Starks said by many lords. Garland, release the prisoners. Olenna said. The Tyrell knight nodded to his grandmother, ignored his father and younger brother, and untied Brian and the others. Mathis Rowan stepped forward. This may explain why Stannis's forces withdrew. Our spies say on the same night King Renly was attacked, Stannis was injured badly on his left arm. Stannis was outnumbered. He might have retreated due to fear of our forces. Lord Tarly said. That would not explain why he has not been seen by his men. The deserters say since that night, only the Red Priestess gives orders in the camp. Rowan retorted. This Red Priestess may be responsible for more. A raven arrived today from Felwood saying that they believe Courtenay Penrose was murdered and thrown off the Drum Tower of Storm's End. Perhaps this witch did the same trick. John Fossoe said. A tall older man with silver hair stroked an elegant silver beard. He had large ears and looked very much like his house sigil, a red gold fox with a prominent snout. If this be magic, then there is little chance that it can be resisted. If Renly dies, then Stannis is his heir. We must consider what happens then. Garland prevented a distraught Sir Loras from drawing his blade. Lord Florent, my husband, your king, has not died. Queen Margaery said coldly. But he has not awoken, my lady. The Maesters do not know if he will ever wake. Florent said. The crowd became restless and uneasy. Robb was shocked at the lack of feeling in this crowd. Only Loras and the Rainbow Guard seemed eager to avenge their king. The others were busy planning their futures. My lords. You cannot possibly think of following Stannis. Robb cried. Renly has no heir of his blood. If Sir Penrose is dead, the garrison may surrender. Elwood Meadows is a green boy of 20. He has not the courage to hold the castle. Florent said. Stannis sent a shadow assassin to kill his brother. He is a would-be kinslayer who dabbles in foul sorcery. Do you think his Red Witch will stop at these deaths? What other atrocities will she commit in her Red God's name? Robb said. Lord Stark, at the Red Temple of Volantis, the High Priest burns people to death as a sacrifice. They say only death can pay for life. Talisa said. If you would follow such a man, then you deserve your fate. Old gods or new, nothing is more cursed than a kinslayer. Robb said, walking away. Robb was famished and thirsty. Garland had offered the use of his pavilion and Tyrell servants ran about, with heaping platters of food. Robb guzzled an entire jug of water and gobbled down slices of hearty bread with bits of cheese. He would have eaten the entire loaf and the joint of beef on the table, but his head still throbbed. A grateful Oliver and Lucas ate as well, and Robb hacked off a large hunk of meat to throw to Grey Wind. Lady Stark thanked Talisa profusely. The 4 guards stayed inside the tent, vigilant with swords in their hands. 2 men and a very tall woman in armor approached, carrying their helmets and with swords strapped to their sides. Sir Imon Huey wore yellow plate with sunflowers, Brian of Tarth wore cobalt blue dented steel, and the man in the lead wore red plate with runes. Lord Stark, I beg an audience. Sir Robar Royce said. He was a serious man, tall and comely in a rough-hewn way. "We wish to thank you for your words." Rob waved them off, as he munched on a skewer of boar, fire peppers and peppers. "It is nothing. Anyone with sense would do the same. Common sense is not that common, at least not among the Reach. We three would swear loyalty to you. Even if King Renly wakes, we cannot serve under Sir Loras. He has proven unworthy to be a Lord Commander of the Kingsguard." Robar said. That was an understatement, but Rob was happy to welcome such formidable warriors. He did not know much of Sir Iman, but Red Robar was the second son of Jon Royce, a Valiman his lord father had known and respected. Brian was a bit odd and awkward, but standing well over 6 feet tall, she was a good fighter, as was Sir Robar. Still, Rob was surprised the Rainbow Guard would abandon their king so quickly. "Why, sir, do you think Renly will not recover?" Rob asked curiously. Before they could answer, Sir Garland had returned to his own tent. "Lord Stark, my family would speak to you." Rob stood up, buckled his dagger and sword, and followed, with the others behind him. They walked to a neighboring pavilion, all gold and green and festooned with roses. Except for Willers, the entire Tyrell family was present, and as always, well dressed and surrounded by the trappings of wealth and power. The Lord of Highgarden sat on a splendid ebony chair in the middle of the room, but the clear locus of power was a round table with fine quills and many pieces of parchment. Olenna sat there with Margaery and a dignified silver-haired woman. Judging from her age, she was likely to be Margaery's mother, Aeleri Hightower. "Loras has something to say," Olenna said, prodding her errant grandchild. The commander of the Rainbow Guard bowed stiffly. "Lord Stark, I was in the wrong. I beg forgiveness for my actions." Rob pointed to Sir Robar, Sir Iman and Brian. "Sir, you owe them an apology, not me." Loras's eyes turned stormy, but it was hard to tell whether that was anger or shame. "Now that is over, shall we eat?" "You must be hungry," Mace said jovially. "We have more important things than food now." Olenna snapped at her fat son. "My lord, Sir Garland's men have already brought me bread and meat," Rob answered. "Lord Tyrell, we thank you for your hospitality," Lady Catelyn said, cheering a crestfallen Mace. "Oh, for goodness sake. We have no time to beat about. Lord Stark, we need your advice on how to best face Stannis," Olenna said. "But Tarly leads your men. And you have Lord Rowan and Fossoe as well," Rob said. "Lord Tarly refuses to move until the king awakens. He says that we have pledged our swords, and only King Renly can give orders to the combined forces," Olenna said. "When he awakens. How long have I been asleep?" Rob asked. "Lord Stark, you have been unconscious for 7 nights," Lady Talisa said to a shocked Rob. 7 nights. That was why his lady mother had been overwhelmed at his sight, and his mouth so dry and belly so empty. His legs nearly buckled again as his mind grasped the ramifications. "But have you sent a letter to my men?" Rob asked. "We wanted to, my lord. We asked many times, but the Tyrells would not allow us any ravens," Patrick Mallister said. "You can hardly blame us. We did not know what had happened, and we did not want to spread mistruths or panic," Olenna said tartly. 7 days. Where is Renly? Have your lord seen him?" Rob said. He realized the answer to his question even as he said the words. "You have hidden Renly away. That is why Tarly does nothing, and why Florent is considering defecting to Stannis. Those dreadful Florents are always scheming," the Queen of Thorns sniffed. "His Grace is still in his tent, getting the best care possible. Several maesters are attending to him," Margaery said. Rob raised his eyebrows and looked to Talisa. "His Grace is in bad shape, worse than you were. Even giving water to drink has been a struggle," the healer admitted. "He is not dead. He will wake up. He must." Loras was distraught. His sister calmly put a hand on her brother's arm for comfort. "And he may, sir. The maesters have not given up hope. Maester Lomis is one of the best healers I have seen, but even Archmaester Ibros do not know how to heal magical injury. But if King Renly does waken, his mind may be clouded and his body weak," Talisa said. 7 days. That means it has been over 10 days, almost 11, since the raven came on the golden tooth. Robb said. The Tyrells exchanged careful and uncertain looks. The Queen of Thorn remained impassive, but Lady Aeleri and her daughter gave a small shudder while Loras and his fat father frowned. Even the friendly Sir Garland had turned grim. The Tyrell guards placed hands on their weapons, as if preparing for an attack. Word has come to us about the golden tooth from many ravens. Margaery began. Lord Stark, we do not know what to believe, but the camps are abuzz with wild stories. Sir Patrick glared with disapproval at the Tyrells. And no doubt, complete lies. Lady Catelyn looked like she wanted to burst with indignation, but she kept silent. Enough hints. What has happened? What news is there of the Northmen and the Rivermen? What of my brother, Jon? Robb said. The tales of the tooth have been disturbing. Do you know what they call Jon Snow? Lady Olenna said. They say he is the bloody wolf of the north. That he used sorcery to destroy the Lannister men at Oxcross and treachery to capture the tooth. He hurled men to their deaths from the castle walls, cut the hands off a young Marbrand boy, starved ladies with infant children, and butchered men who surrendered. Jon is no warlock, and he is not cruel. If I captured the tooth, they would spread lies about me as well. Robb said. I would not be so sure that these are lies. We have heard it from many different men. And something strange has happened in the Westerlands. Olenna said. The messengers say that the Westerlords have abandoned House Lannister. Ashmark, Silver Hill, Hornvale, Sarsfield, Riverspring, Deepden have gone silent. Your brother has forced those lords to back down. Garland said. But how? Robb said. The bastard says he will kill every child and prisoner at the tooth. Catelyn said bitterly. They say he threatened to return the squires back in 3 pieces, one for each Stark the Iron Throne once held, or send their heads and hands back to their families. Others claim he will starve the prisoners to death if besieged and feed their bodies to his wolf. That is why the Westerlords have submitted to the bloody wolf. Garland said. Robb rolled his eyes. If they died from hunger, Ghost will not eat skin and bones. I must go north to Riverrun. Of course, Lord Stark. You must punish this Jon Snow for his crimes. Mace said. Punish? My brother won a battle and subdued the Westermen. It has been 11 days since he took the tooth. Tywin Lannister will be forced to leave Harrenhal and give us battle. I must return before the fighting is done. Robb said. So that was your plan? To lure the old lion back west? Sir Garland asked with admiration. Robb nodded. Yes, attacking Harrenhal would be foolish. My brother went west to force the hand of House Lannister. Lord Tywin is too proud to allow his lands to be threatened. I am only surprised by how quickly it has happened. Surely you do not agree with his actions? To starve and kill prisoners. Catelyn said. This is war, mother. The Lannisters began this. They can reap the fruits of their harvest. But something must be done about Jon. Robb pointed to the stack of parchment. Lady Olenna, may I take some? The Queen of Thorns arched her eyebrows. Of course, Lord Stark. Robb took the quill and paper. If you might observe, Sir Garland, Sir Patrick, and Sir Lucas. I, Robb of House Stark, Lord of Winterfell and Warden of the North, decree that my brother, Jon Snow, to be my heir until I have a child of my own blood. If I should be slain, or injured, then Jon Snow has command of the armies of the North and the Rivermen pledged to me. Robb, you cannot do this. You will disinherit your true-born brothers and sisters and create another Blackfyre rebellion. I cannot let you do this. Catelyn cried. I do not need your consent. I am Lord of House Stark. Sansa must be disinherited. If she has a Lannister child, Lord Tywin would use that to claim Winterfell. I could have died from the Shadow Assassin. And if I died, who would lead the Northmen? Robb said. What about Arya or Bran? They should be your heirs, not a bastard. Catelyn said. Bran is crippled. He cannot lead men in war. And no one has seen Arya since father died. She is likely dead. As for bastard, look at the Baratheons. Stannis and Renly would kill each other with armies and foul magic. True-borns are not better than bastards. Rob said bluntly. How much do you trust this Snow? After these stories of savagery and cruelty at the Golden Tooth? Olenna asked. He should never have been a Snow. Jon is a dire wolf, as much a Stark as my ancestors. We share my father's blood. And he will bring fire and sword to House Lannister. My lords, fix your seals to the decree. Jon Snow is my heir. Lord Rob, what will you do now? Margaery asked. Ride north. My brother and I have a war to fight. Rob said. Author's notes. This is a homage to the cheese scene in the show. In the books, I imagine Lady Olenna could merely glare and the cheese would arrive. Dinner without cheese is like a beautiful woman with only one eye. This is a quote from the famous French gastronome, Brillat Savarin. I have never read his work The Physiology of Taste, but it is supposed to be a classic among foodies. Forks. The fork is actually a recent innovation which only came to Western Europe a few hundred years ago. Before the fork, people would just use a dagger to cut meat and a spoon. While it may seem strange, lavish banquets would impress the people. In a time of peace, the Tyrell strategy of image management may well have made Renly appear more kingly. Unfortunately, the Game of Thrones is not a time of peace. Jon is like Ghost, a dire wolf and yet apart from the pack. George R.R. Martin said something very similar in a 2003 interview. Rob has no inkling why Jon can never be only a Stark. That is a hard strong keep and it commands the hill road. These are Oprah Winfrey's words as overheard by Catelyn Starks in A Clash of Kings. I gave them to Garland Tyrell instead. The royal wheelhouse is ridiculous and a good example of how GRM is not good at math. Imagine 40 horses pulling in one direction. How long would it take to stop? It is like the wall which is 700 feet high, and wildlings shooting arrows at the top. And they are climbing 700 feet while being fired on by the Night's Watch. An army of sheep led by a stag is better than an army of stags led by a sheep. This is a riff off the quote by Alexander the Great: I am not afraid of an army of lions led by a sheep, I am afraid of an army of sheep led by a lion. I believe strongly that Jon would avenge Robb and vice versa. In the books, there are scenes about you are the Night's Watch, you can't interfere with political struggles. GRM writes that so Jon can act all conflicted and make the whole his watch is ended scene. I can buy that Jon won't help his brother get the throne. What I don't buy is that if your relatives get slaughtered, you don't want revenge. Imagine if Robb was alive and king in the north, and gets news that Jon gets murdered by his men. Does Robb sit and say I can't interfere? I think he marches up there, and hangs everyone involved. I understand the logistics were hard and they wanted to write in Arya and riff on the Rat Cook, but Jon should have avenged Robb. Renly's speech with the peach is omitted from the TV show and that is a real shame. It is one of GRM's best subplots. Renly is greedy, but I think he does want his brother to smell the roses, to enjoy life. Stannis reacts like Renly is humiliating him, which exemplifies his prickly and loner nature. I feel like the TV show makes Renly a Tyrell stooge, but he is really not in the book. His abilities to build alliances and political skill are valuable in peace. He is charismatic, likable, and acts like a king. That means a lot when kings need a mantle of authority. He is just a casualty of this Azor Ahai saves the world meme, which is nonsensical by season 8. In book 5, the story of Azor Ahai and Lightbringer is going strong. The book version and the TV version of the death are a bit different. In the book version, Renly's throat is chopped off by the shadow and then it disappears. But, in the books, Brian only claims later in King's Landing that it had the face of Stannis. Catelyn tells Sir Robar that it was Stannis in the books. But she actually never sees anything. She just knows it is true. I found that very odd. How does she know? It is dark and it happens quickly. The TV show had a shadow with features. It is taller than Renly, but I still don't know how you identify Stannis. Of course in this story the fight is much longer, so they can see face. I find the reaction of Loras after Renly's death appalling. He kills 3 of Renly's guards, 2 of whom are on the Rainbow Guard. And nobody says anything. There are no repercussions, and in the book, they just say Loras went mad with grief like those stories of Sir Lancelot. These aren't no-name wildlings. This is the second son of Yohn Royce and another noble knight. I suppose they might have blamed Brian, but the casual dismissal of these lives as irrelevant seems wrong. In my story, I imagine they need at least a trial of some sort. Of course, they try to beat out a confession. Finally, the chapter ends with Robb declaring Jon his heir. In the books, this happens after Theon attacks the North, and right before the Red Wedding. Here, his near death at the hands of the Shadow makes Robb realize his mortality. Is it unfair to displace Bran? Well, Robb knows Bran can't fight a war. This is the major problem with the TV ending. In Westeros, military leadership is important as the threat of war is constant. Think Robert Baratheon, Aegon the Conqueror, the Young Wolf, even Tywin. These are all generals. How can a cripple hold together the throne? Lords do not listen to people they don't respect or fear. With Bran on the throne, the Seven Kingdoms splinter, and more wars would follow. Chapter 20, Bets and Debts. Chapter text. Bets and Debts. The skinny little girl with brown hair, grey eyes and a long face sat at the bottom of the stairwell to the ruined tower. All 5 towers were immense, taller than the highest buildings at Winterfell. Everything at Harrenhal had decayed, after Aegon the Conqueror extinguished House Hoare with dragon fire. The stone had melted and cracked, and the men had been burnt alive. When the wind blew from the north, the castle would wail, either cries from the dead Harren the Black, or gusts passing through the fissures of the lumpy, misshapen towers. Old Nan had told the Stark children stories about Harrenhal, the thousands of slaves who died building the monstrous stronghold, the human blood mixed into the mortar, and the many horrors that haunted the castle's past. What were stories though to the present? Arya had seen terrible things, the tickler practicing his trade, women raped 6 times in a single night, and bodies sliced in half by the mountain sword. Some of those bodies were the children of the raped women. Old Nan had scared them with stories, but Arya now knew true fear, to be so numb that your spirit died and you hoped only to survive until nightfall. She was a lamb now, among a herd of sheep to be plucked, shorn and slaughtered. Arya hated how she felt, afraid, helpless, and meek. The small folk cringed and cowered, their lives at the mercy of the mountain, the bloody mummers, and the Lannister army. But things had changed the last few days. Fear had spread through the castle. It had passed through the massive gatehouse, into the kitchens and the bathhouse, through the barracks and the Hall of 100 Hearths, and steadily up the towers. At the war councils, she could see and hear flickers of doubt among the commanders. On the battlements, in the courtyards, and the stables, the knights and men-at-arms were nervous and wary. And everyone at Harrenhal, the prisoners, servants, soldiers, and lords, could sense the battle looming on the horizon. Ari. The plump boy with straw-colored hair and big slow eyes scampered into the room. He was followed by an older lad, on the verge of manhood, whose thick knotted muscles showed through the leather apron. "Don't call me that. My name here is Nan." Arya hissed. Hot Pie stopped, and smiled sheepishly. "Okay, Ari." He handed her a tart, stuffed with chopped nuts, fruit and cheese. Arya wolfed it down, as Gendry looked around, hands on his hammer. Arya slept in a bed of straw hidden in an alcove beneath the Wailing Tower. It was far from the Kingspire Tower and her duties as Tywin Lannister's cupbearer, but the constant shriek of the wind drove others away. The smithy and the kitchen were close, so after dinner, there were a few moments left to speak to friends and share news. They met near an abandoned granary, with the maze of tunnels offering crannies and crevices to hide. Arya had lost Needle, so she relied on the shadows to save her from beatings and worse. The Mountain left this evening. He went north with 200 men. Gendry said. The servants whispered a great deal about the old lion's plans. Some said he would go south to Highgarden, others that the Lannisters would march west again to ravage Pink Maiden and Acorn Hall, and still others believed Lord Tywin would repair Harrenhal to form a new seat for House Lannister to rule the Riverlands. Arya doubted the last very much. The Wents had only used the lower thirds of 2 of the 5 towers, and the rest had fallen into complete decay. I heard that the bloody wolf cut out Stafford Lannister's heart, roasted it in a fire, and fed it to his dire wolf. Hot Pie squeaked. That's stupid. Wolves eat meat raw. Why would the heart be roasted? Arya glared. They say that Jon Snow starved the women and children at the Golden Tooth until the Westerlords surrendered. That he threatened to return prisoners in pieces, hands and feet first, and swore to kill everyone if the castle was besieged. Gendry said. Arya shrugged. Good. I hope they all die. Gendry looked at her carefully. What do you think the Northmen will do, if they capture the castle? Harrenhal, with thick and sheer curtain walls and mighty gatehouse and battlements, seemed invulnerable. However, the castle had surrendered many times, although Arya vaguely remembered from lessons that dragons were often the cause. Will they eat us or feed us to the wolves? Hot Pie asked. Goodwife Hara says Northerners are all wargs who eat human flesh after battle. She says the bloody wolf is the worst of all and that he feeds weirwood trees with the blood of children. I don't want to be eaten. Unlike her, Hot Pie still had a lot of flesh to eat. That's ridiculous. She snorted. Ari, at the holdfast, you yelled Winterfell, when we were fighting on the wall. Hot Pie said. I never did. Arya yelled. That's a lie. The plump boy quivered, as if he thought Arya would turn into a wolf and eat him. Gendry took him by the arm to stop his shaking. Hot Pie is just scared. He is worried that the Northern Army will attack when the Lannisters leave. Gendry said. How can anyone be worse than the Lannisters? Arya snapped. If they think we betrayed the Riverlands by serving the Lannisters, they could be. They could chop our heads off and mount them on spikes as a warning to traitors. Gendry said. We were forced to serve the Lannisters. Arya said. They won't know that. If the fighting is hard and bloody, the Northmen could put the entire castle to the sword. Gendry said. That's not true, Arya thought. Jon and Robb would never do that, but knights protected the innocent only in Sansa's stories. Sir Gregor Clegane proved that was a lie. She bit her lip. Would anyone believe a serving girl claiming to be Arya Stark? She did not know many Stark bannermen, and even less the houses pledged to the Tullys. If she could get a message to her brothers, but how could she? There were 3 maesters at Harrenhal, but Lord Tywine watched their ravens with great care, especially since the tooth. I don't want to leave Harrenhal. There's hot bread here, and oatcakes, and I can steal a bite of the honeyed rabbits off the spit. I don't want to eat worms in the forest. Hot Pie blubbered. If we get caught in a siege, there will be nothing to eat. The Lannisters are getting ready to ride. Today, they brought 100 horses for us to shoe. I saw squires polishing saddles and Tuffleberry ordering servants to load casks and barrels of drink and food on 2 wagons. It won't be long before the army departs. Gendry said. They will leave men to guard the castle though. Hot Pie said. Not many. The Northmen sacked the Golden Tooth even with a full garrison. Harrenhal is 200 miles from Riverrun. We don't want to be in the castle if it is attacked. Gendry said. Where would we go? We ran around like fools and got captured by the Mountain's men. They will kill us if that happens again. Arya said. Gendry had a stubborn look on his face. He looks more like a mule than a bull, Arya thought. We are 40 miles from Harroway. When the Lannisters march, the roads will be full of people. We can pretend to be part of the army or small folk running from any battle. There is an inn at the crossroads. Inns have kitchens and forges for horseshoes. We could all work there, and there would be food and a place to sleep. He said. All right, but how do we get out? There are 2 gates, west and east, and guards watching a dozen murder holes on each side. Arya said. There is a postern gate near the Tower of Ghosts, and only a few men there. If we could sneak out at night, or create a distraction. Gendry said. Arya chewed her lip. Jaqen Hgar promised 3 lives for the 3 deaths stolen from the Red God. He was a Lannister soldier now and could escort them through the gate, or kill the guards. My brothers are more wolf than man, and so am I. I have the wolf blood, just like the young wolf or the white wolf. I know a way. She was done with being afraid. Jon relaxed as the red sandstone walls of Riverrun appeared in the distance. The 5 days' ride back had been uneventful, but he would not rest until the food and supplies were held securely at the Tully Castle. Hundreds of wagons made the trek from the Golden Tooth to Riverrun, laden with grain, nuts, dried meat, fish, and ale. Karstark and Umbermen drove thousands of cattle back, and the cows had eaten bare the grass next to the river road. In 4 years at the Citadel, John read all the scrolls he could find on war in Westeros, Aegon's conquest, the Dornish Wars, the Rebellion of the Faith Militant, the Dance of the Dragons, and Robert's Rebellion. The Maesters paid great attention to plots, schemes and treachery. There were tales of brave knights, good queens, wise kings, and vile villains. John thought those writings, so clearly biased to the winners, neglected the importance of food and supplies. Battles, campaigns and even wars turned on very small things, and the care and feeding of soldiers mattered. An army marched on its stomach. To ensure those supplies, John had to give up the Mormonts. 1,000 soldiers from Bear Island held the Golden Tooth under the she-bear. Lady Mage was ferocious but honest, and John had made a vow on the honor of House Stark. He trusted her to keep the pledge. But 1,000 men, well armored and intensely loyal, were a high price to pay, and only one of Mage's daughters would return to Riverrun. John surveyed the remaining troops. The Marndale brothers took charge of the supplies, their men guarding the many wagons. Eddard Karstark served as captain of the Outriders, fanning forward and doubling back to make certain there were no surprise attacks. Small Janumber had fallen near the rear, as the cattle took their sweet time on the road. Daisy rode by his side, as Lyra and Jory stayed with their lady mother. The Mormonte watched over the prisoners with the help of Chet, Geryon, and the Wintertown boys. They had only taken 4 dozen captives from the Tooth. Besides Sir Stafford and his 3 captains, the others were all sons of the leading houses of the Westerlands. The only exceptions were Lady Dorna and her daughter, Janie E. The lady prayed 7 times a day, and kept both her children close. He rubbed Ghost's head, the shaggy pale fur a source of comfort and warmth. Ghost did not like the phrase. He tolerated Sir Stephen but growled at Black Walder. The irascible younger Free was squabbling with his uncles, and demanding that they provide men to transport the canopy bed back to the twins. John had not realized this, but there were several houses sworn to the phrase, Charlton, Irenford and Hague. The men of those houses seemed split between Sir Stephen and his grandson, and that did not bode well. The Freys and their sworn men were nearly half of the rivermen that followed Robb in battle. The guards on the walls hailed them with a salute as the western bridge opened. As John dismounted, Edmure Tully and Jason Mallister walked out to greet him with worried faces. John gave orders to escort the prisoners to the Maiden Vault and walked into Riverrun. The brown-haired man looked down at the table, his eyes not meeting his uncle's glare. His pose made Denise Mallister, Lord Jason's nephew, look even more guilty. "Tell him, sir, what happened," Edmure Tully said. "We were drinking apple wine, and paid a visit to the miller's daughter. Her father came home and chased us away from his house. We had finished our skins of wine, and hadn't managed to satisfy ourselves, so we went to the brothel in the village. And there," Denise said. "Lord Snow does not need to know the details of your debauchery," Jason said in an icy tone. "I think Greyjoy put something in my drink. When I woke, my head was throbbing. He disappeared and took the scroll from my saddlebags." Denise hung his head in shame. "Why would he drug you, sir? And what is this scroll?" John said. Lord Mallister answered the question. "Seaguard was built to protect from Ironborn attacks, but we are also sailors. When he becomes a man grown, a Mallister takes passage to explore other ports, Lannisport, Old Town, King's Landing, Gulltown. My grandfather, Jaek Mallister, sailed as far as Volantis. My lady wife gave Denise a name-day gift of a scroll with passage on the Myraham, a cog out of Old Town. So you told Theon Greyjoy about this scroll? And he stole it while you were drunk?" Denise nodded to John's question. "But why have you not sent a raven to Seaguard?" John asked. "We have. The Myraham left port 2 days ago," Edmure said. "My nephew only told me 3 days after. It took him 2 days to recover from his stupor, and another to realize that Greyjoy was a thief," the elder Mallister said. "Who else knows?" John asked. "We have not told anyone, Snow. But Greyjoy has been gone for a week," Edmure said. John clasped his hands together in thought. It was a 3-day ride to Seaguard, and 400 miles from there to Pike. Theon would go there to see his lord father. A cog was slow, and might take over a week to traverse such a distance, but the longships of the Iron Fleet were sleek and fast. What would Balon Greyjoy do? Would he accede to Theon's request, and attack Lannisport? The Lord Reaper watched his two eldest die fighting the North and the Rivermen. Jon doubted that such a man would ever forgive those losses. I will call a conference for the Northern Lords. Lord Jason, I would strengthen the defences at Seaguard. The map of the North was spread out on the table of the Solar when they assembled in the afternoon. Many lords were absent from the castle. Roose Bolton and Rickard Karstark were further east on the River Road. The Great Jon had lent his efforts and men to clearing the southern castles of Atlanta and Wayfarer's Rest. Lord Hornwood had gone south but left his heir at Riverrun. And Crannog men were busy scouting the meandering twists and turns of the Trident. There was no time to mince words or answer curious questions about the cracking of the tooth. Theon